Origin. The outcomes of wars that traverse the cosmic seas are not dictated by a select few illustrious figures on the grand chessboard of history. Each individual is merely a pawn, whether one be a grand marshal, an exceptional captain, a legendary pilot, or a distinguished interstellar war. I or none can alter the prevailing winds of fate. Yet, in the annals of time, society tends to overlook the true heroes, reveling instead in the legendary tales of a handful of remarkable individuals. Over cups of tea and during casual conversations, the myths of heroes who single-handedly confront hundreds circulate, alongside their seemingly infallible strategies and the captive. Aiding narratives that evoke both admiration and envy among the ordinary populace, as for the sacrifices they made, their sorrows, and their helplessness who truly comprehends or cares. Thus this tale unfolds. It is essential to clarify that the terms such as tanks, aircraft, and warships in this narrative have alternative designations in common parlance. However, for various undisclosed reasons, historians of Earth in later times have opted to substitute these terms with those from Earth in their chronicles. For the sake of clarity, this book adopts the same practice that he once soared through the desolate starry skies, gliding past the boundless abyss of black holes. With a lethal grace, he danced upon the celestial flames, spreading terror of death throughout the Milky Way. Oh, eternal Croesus, who has brought your celestial flights to an end? Was it the swarms of Tyran, the warships of Midar, or that towering, formidable black stone fortress? No, even the flowing locks of Dia could not tether your steps. Only the exquisite blend of duty and loyalty, the fabric woven with brotherhood and camaraderie, could bring your performance to a close. A poem recited by the chieftain of the Vikian tribe at the commemoration of the 200th anniversary of the disappearance of the Croesus 2581. Prologue 2. Mo Yuan abhorred blood, detesting all that was associated with it. Yet, he found himself compelled to consume blood in abundance of it. Human blood in vast quantities, be it from foes, allies, or even kin. This necessity was not merely for survival, but for the future and hope of humanity. From the moment the warships of the Milradians emerged, his fate was irrevocably altered. Chapter 1. The line of death in Warbang. With the sound of the gunshot, another lifeless body fell to the ground. That if you do not disclose the entrance to the underground city, these individuals will serve as your example. The speaker was a young officer with golden hair, appearing to be in his early 20s, clad in a black combat suit, brandishing an explosive handgun with a bloodied long knife embroidered upon his chest. Behind him stood a formation of over 100 similarly attired soldiers, their dark barrels all aimed menacingly at the crowd ahead. In the clearing between the two factions lay a gruesome tableau of more than 10 corpses, sprawled haphazardly, their blood staining the pristine ground, while the air was thick with the stench of carnage. The crowd remained silent, enveloped in a chilling atmosphere, punctuated only by the occasional wail of an infant and the soothing murmurs of a mother. This was a vast city square, its elegance accentuated by the towering skyscrapers surrounding it, the imposing white statue, the graceful arches, and the vibrant flora alongside each fountain at the center. The tall bronze columns around the square narrated tales of its ancient history, while the statue of the goddess of peace directly ahead symbolized the aspirations of benevolent souls. Originally, this was a place where the people of Saros celebrated their bountiful harvests and hosted grand performances, but today, the brutal invaders had sullied it with blood. Seeing that no one had yet stepped forward, the golden-haired officer bellowed at the crowd. I will count to 3 if no one confesses. I shall execute 1 person every minute untie. Someone stands forth. The crowd remains silent. 1, 2, 3. All right, Milu, proceed. A cohort of soldiers surged into the throng, instantly met with a cacophony of curses and cries. The soldiers seized hair and tore at garments, roughly dragging one civilian after another from the mass. Firearms were aimed at their heads, poised for the officer's command to unleash greater carnage. Many a heart could not bear to witness the impending bloodshed, bowing their heads in quiet sorrow. Suddenly, a series of tremendous explosions echoed in the distance, causing the earth to tremble faintly. Joy flickered across the faces of numerous onlookers. A murmurous excitement spread like a tidal wave. Our army is coming. The blonde officer, sensing the shift in momentum, barked to the side, engage. As the soldiers prepared to fire, a rhythmic sound of marching footsteps approached. Salute. With rifles angled towards the heavens, a troop of soldiers arrived beside the fair-haired youth. Leading them was another youthful officer, with short black hair and elongated eyes that radiated a chilling intensity beneath his arched brows. His tightly pressed lips were more severe than the murderous atmosphere surrounding them. Though not tall, he possessed a lithe frame, wielding a bloodied long knife in his hand as well. He turned to survey the crowd, and wherever his gaze alighted, those individuals shivered involuntarily, as if meeting the glint of a blade's edge. The once enthusiastic crowd fell into a profound silence once more. Creamy, have you located the entrance to the underground city? Inquired the dark-haired officer. Creamy, the blonde officer, responded awkwardly, "Sir, these obstinate wretches are quite resilient. I have executed 12 of them, yet not a single one has confessed. Give me half an hour more, and I shall pry their lips open." The dark-haired officer replied, "There is no time left. The Cortez Alliance forces have commenced their counteroffensive. I shall conduct the interrogation myself." Just as he was about to speak, a distant explosion erupted again, this time more intense and alarmingly closer, accompanied by the cacophony of battle cries and towering flames. One of the officers beside the dark-haired commander remarked, "Captain, we have received word from the radio that the 2nd Armored Brigade on our left flank has retreated." His voice was loud enough for those in front to hear clearly, and many civilians displayed expressions of delight. The dark-haired officer coldly asked, "What instructions has the fleet provided?" The officer replied, "The fleet has announced that the aircraft of the 52nd Brigade will arrive in 10 minutes to provide us with cover." The dark-haired officer nodded and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am aware of your tenacity. Ordinary threats hold no sway over you. However, I assure you, should you fail to disclose the entrance to the underground city, you will undoubtedly lament the stubbornness of your bones." His voice was soft, yet a profound chill surged through the hearts of all present. The crowd expressed their sentiments through a solemn silence. "Now," the dark-haired officer spoke slowly, "I ask that you do not close your eyes." He approached a civilian, poised to take action, when the earlier messenger shouted, "Commander, the defensive line of the 3rd Infantry Regiment ahead has been breached, and the regiment is currently encircled by the enemy. The Army Planetary Operations Command has reported an inability to dispatch rescue forces." Before the dark-haired officer could respond, a cascade of dire news followed. The 3rd Regiment has surrendered. The commander has been captured. The 1st Company of the 9th Infantry Regiment on the right flank has lost contact. Artillery Company 2 has been attacked by enemy guerrillas, resulting in the total destruction of our artillery. We will lose fire support in 5 hours. The fleet has announced that enemy vessels have entered the star system, and the scheduled air support will not arrive. The Army Planetary Operations Command has reported that, according to satellite images, 2 enemy forces, each consisting of approximately a division, are advancing towards the city's flanks, expected to complete the encirclement in 5 hours. The crowd erupted into subdued cheers. The dark-haired officer surveyed the crowd and addressed Creamy, "You are to organize the assault team. Here," he pointed to the ground beneath him, "is the line of death for this operation. Any who retreat shall be executed without mercy." "Understood." Creamy saluted and hurried away. Once the arrangements were made, the dark-haired officer raised his blade and coldly addressed the civilians before him, who were animated with the joy of victory. "Disclose the loca time of the underground city, or else." "Stop!" A commanding voice from afar interrupted him, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps as another group approached. "Maury, who are these 3? The dark-haired officer inquired of a short soldier accompanying the newcomers, who were clad in brown military uniforms. The dark-haired officer recognized them as officers of the Cortez Alliance. The leader among them spoke. "Are you the commander of this unit?" "I am Mo Yuan, the commander of the Phantom Regiment," replied the dark-haired officer. The leader glanced at the corpses on the ground and solemnly stated, "I demand that you immediately release all civilians here. Our forces guarantee humane treatment and leniency for the atrocities you have committed." Mo Yuan, the commander, scoffed. "On what grounds do you make such a claim?" The leader replied, "The situation is quite clear. Your army has retreated completely. To inform you, our fleet has entered this star system. Do not expect rescue. If you do not surrender, you face certain death. Furthermore," he scoffed, "you are confronted by the Rangers of Saint Cyr." His voice resonated loudly, causing a stir among the crowd. "It is the Rangers. Lord Daiska has come to rescue us. These devils cannot escape. I must avenge my son." Mo Yuan fixed a blade-like gaze upon the officer, sending a shiver down his spine. He addressed the messenger, "Inform Crimey that the oversight team is to be disbanded." The short soldier, Maury, urged, "Boss, are we retreating?" "No," Mo Yuan replied. He spoke deliberately to the men behind the officer. "Please convey a message to your commander." The leading officer responded, "Speak to me directly." "No need." Mo Yuan shook his head. "The dead cannot deliver messages." As soon as the words left his lips, he swung his bloodied blade, cleaving the officer's skull in half. Before the other 2 officers could react, he turned and drew his explosive firearm, unleashing a barrage upon the line of civilians previously captured by Crimey, sending dozens company lapsing into pools of blood. "You!" a Cortez officer shouted in fury. Mo Yuan stepped forward, wielding his blade with lethal precision, severing an ear from each corpse that lay upon the ground with every strike. With a swift kick, a multitude of severed ears soon accumulated before the 2 Cortez officers, that he stated flatly, "Please deliver these ears, along with that half a head, to your commander. Inform him that we are the Ghost Brigade, marked by a bloodied longsword embroidered upon our chests. Just you wait, no one from your regiment will remain alive." This was the parting remark of the 2 officers as they departed. Mo Yuan disregarded the enraged crowd in the square, turning to assess the soldiers under his command. Most bore expressions devoid of emotion, their faces etched with the resilience of hardship, while a few new recruits displayed a hint of trepidation. He nodded in satisfaction and gestured towards one soldier. Do you fear death? The soldier proclaimed loudly. The dead do not fear death. Precisely, Mo Yuan declared. Only the living harbor such fears. Uncover your garments. Amidst the bewildered gazes of the surrounding civilians, the soldiers of the Ghost Brigade began to unfasten their powered combat suits, revealing that most had a bomb strapeda round their waists. Emoli equipped the new recruits with glory bombs. He addressed the new soldiers, saying, "You have all heard. The Cortez will spare none from our brigade. This operation will not have an oversight team. It is a choice between a glorious death in battle or a tortured demise in a POW camp. The decision lies with you." Then, in a thunderous voice, Mo Yuan bellowed at the crowd. "Remember this. Your army is waging war against ghosts, against fear, against death itself. You shall never know victory." The sound of explosions grew ever closer as the elite Marines of the Cortez Alliance, the St. Seraph's Rangers, were on the verge of arrival. Through the monitor, Mo Yuan could already discern the panicked retreat of his own troops, pursued relentlessly by figures clad in brown combat uniforms. At this moment, his heart was devoid of panic. Instead, a smile graced his lips. He was acutely aware that he had delineated an invisible line of death for each soldier, a line far more effective than the barrels of the supervisory teams. The phantoms, stripped of hope for survival, would exact an unprecedented toll from their adversaries. In this battle, he too would carve his name into the annals of history. The goal within his heart drew nearer with each passing moment. Enduring Earth, await your time one day. We shall claim our freedom, and we shall not remain slaves forever. Yet, a gentle voice pulled him back to reality. Is this truly the real you? Is this really me? Mo Yuan couldn't help but smile bitterly, reflecting on the immense transformation he had undergone. But how did it all begin? Section 2. Biological experiment subjects. Type 4 catalyst. Injection. With a solemn female voice echoing. Mechanical probes moved with precision as tubes filled with crimson liquid coursed through the veins of the individuals before them. Mo Yuan glanced around, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. With himself included, only 8 remained. The facial features of all had become grotesquely distorted, and anguish permeated the air. Their innards, intestines, and even brain matter felt as if they were being gnawed upon by countless insects. Yet their hands and feet were firmly restrained to the surgical table, leaving them only the option of desperate writhing. "I can't endure this." A piercing cry erupted as one individual convulsed violently twice before falling silent. Only 7 survivors remained. Mo Yuan endeavored to conjure thoughts of joy to distract himself from the torment. Yet the agony coursing through his nerves was not easily forgotten. Cold sweat streamed down his body, and he gasped for air, compounded by an overwhelming dread of the uncertain future. Originally, there had been 280 aboard the ship. But in just 2 months, only these few remained. After today, how many of this batch of Earthlings would still be alive? 3 brief minutes stretched longer than 3 years. The suffering gradually subsided, yet the trial was far from over. The process of bone marrow extraction commenced. The surgical table rotated 90 degrees, and a metallic plate snugly fitted against his back split apart. A probe pierced into Mo Yuan's spine from behind. A chill coursed through him, as though something was swiftly escaping from his body. It was merely psychological. He repeatedly reassured himself, yet the sense of emptiness deepened within. Following that void came a wave of intense nausea, accompanied by violent spasms in his stomach. The sensation was far more tormenting to the nerves than the previous pain. "Perhaps I shall not survive this day," Mo Yuan suddenly pondered. The extraction of bone marrow had ceased, and the process of biological modification commenced. The woman behind the transparent protective barrier issued a command once more. Upon hearing those words, Mo Yuan could no longer contain himself and fainted. When he regained consciousness, he found himself back in that familiar cell, albeit with only 2 cellmates remaining, while within the densely packed lower chambers of the spaceship, only 2 rooms still housed individuals. Mo Yuan attempted to wave his hand and felt a significant surge in strength. This round of modification seemed to have enhanced the muscular system of his arms. And now his power was likely double that of a boxer on Earth. After 2 months of bodily transformation, the few survivors possessed physical capabilities unimaginable to Earthlings. Yet their fear deepened with each passing day. They were oblivious to the endpoint of this series of experiments and the intentions behind them. Would we become monsters? Each individual had silently questioned themselves. Yet, what was most terrifying was the alarmingly high mortality rate associated with these modifications. "I must survive. Father, Mother, I cannot disappoint you. The Mo family cannot become extinct through me. I promised you I would endure, that I would complete the mission." Mo Yuan silently vowed. He gazed at his left hand, where a small red dragon spiraled at the center of his palm. It was neither a painting nor a tattoo, but rather felt as though it was part of his skin. This was Mo Yuan's final hope. However, he did not wish to employ it until the very last moment. Earth's refuse, come forth. Training time has arrived. The door of the cell swung open. A Malardin held a gun to their backs. The three individuals silently rose and, alongside the remaining four from another cell, traversed a lengthy corridor before ascending in an elevator to a vast chamber. This was the training ground aboard the vessel, specifically designated for the slaves. Hurry up, don't dawdle. The guard impatiently struck Mo Yuan's back with the gun, causing him to stumble forward. He then exerted every ounce of strength to begin running, as he had no desire to feel the sting of the electric baton. He sprinted around the training arena, completing 20 laps at breakneck speed. Following that, he engaged in strength exercises, leaping 100 times while clutching a raw titanium crystal ore, before proceeding to execute 300 rolls. Finally, he endured a minute of mild electric shock as part of his endurance training. Each participant was compelled to give their utmost. For the last to finish would be deprived of food for a day, a fate that nearly guaranteed they would not survive the subsequent trial. Damn it. You Earthlings are worthless. I've never encountered such an inept race. We've only been here for 2 months, and look how few of us are left. The guard berated from the sidelines. The 7 remaining individuals had undergone numerous trials, and their physical prowess could be deemed the strongest among Earthlings. Thus, the intensity of competition did not wane despite the dwindling numbers. As Mo Yuan completed 3 laps, a burly white man who had been shadowing him tripped him. By the time he regained his footing, he found himself in last place. The 6 others, all Caucasian, seemed to have covertly conspired, intent on sacrificing Mo Yuan this time around. Mo Yuan was suddenly engulfed by a wave of sorrow. In a world where Earth had been reduced to a planet of servitude, the deep-seated prejudices among races persisted unabated. He pondered maliciously about who would be sacrificed next, unaware of his own demise. Nevertheless, he pressed on, determined to catch up. To his surprise, he surpassed 2 individuals by the end of his run, securing the 5th position. However, it was of little consequence. The 6 adversaries were resolute in their intent to sacrifice him. During the strength training, a young man dealt him a vicious kick, leaving Mo Yuan unable to rise for an extended period. By the time he gritted his teeth and completed the strength exercises, the weakest among them had managed 100 rolls. Milda, the overseer, stood by, laughing boisterously. Such petty squabbles among the ants were of no concern to them. The prison door was once again slammed shut, and Mo Yuan realized he had taken another step closer to death. It was likely around 8 in the evening on Earth. The solitary meal of the day was delivered to the cell. It consisted of a sandwich made from a wheat-like substance mixed with an insect reminiscent of a spider. Though repulsive, it was the only means of survival. As soon as the food was brought in, the 3 prisoners scrambled for it. The rule that the last in training would forfeit their meal merely meant that one less portion was provided. If one had the strength, they could certainly seize their comrades' food. However, Mo Yuan's 2 cellmates had formed an alliance, and after a flurry of punches and kicks, he was unceremoniously tossed into a corner of the cell like a ragged sack. The strongest among them, a burly man named Tyson, who had tripped Mo Yuan earlier, gleefully devoured 3 sandwiches, while another named Baker managed to claim 1. "Kid, we have no choice," they said. "Make the most of your final moments." Tyson expressed a hint of remorse. The bread had been completely consumed, leaving not a crumb behind, ensuring his survival for at least another 30 hours. Am I truly unable to survive? No, I can endure. I must persevere. In a daze, Mo Yuan glanced at the small dragon resting in the palm of his left hand. If you are merciless, do not blame me for being unkind. Chapter 3. The Emergence of the Bloodline in the Dim Light. Mo Yuan bit into the tip of his right index finger, swiftly tracing a pentagram over the small dragon with his blood. The vibrant crimson liquid transformed into a dark hue upon contact with the red dragon, sending a chilling wave coursing through Mo Yuan's entire being. I vow with my soul and blood to uphold the sacred oath made after the first impact. The dynasty of Knowers shall not falter, and the torch of the stars shall never extinguish. Mo Yuan softly recited these peculiar and cryptic words, the meaning of which had been lost through the ages, yet it was customary to chant them this way. Adhering to tradition felt imperative at this moment. As he spoke, he smeared the dark blood over his body, ultimately inscribing an inverted pentagram upon his forehead. What on earth is this kid mumbling about? Baker questioned. Never mind. He won't last much longer. It seems he is praying to some deity, Tyson replied, feeling a twinge of guilt towards Mo Yuan. Yet, for the sake of survival, He had no other recourse. God? If that nonsense existed, we would have been saved long ago. You fool, stop disturbing my sleep, Baker retorted, stepping forward to seize Mo Yuan, intending to teach him a lesson. Suddenly, Mo Yuan's grip tightened around him. What are you doing? Beck exerted a vigorous shake, yet failed to dislodge Mo Yuan, whose grip was astonishingly powerful. Upon focusing, Beck noticed the eerie crimson glow emanating from Mo Yuan's eyes, and a ghastly grin revealed two elongated canines that were anything but human. Help! Beck exclaimed in horror, but before he could break free, Mo Yuan opened his mouth wide, sinking his teeth viciously into the carotid artery of Beck's neck. In an instant, Beck's body went limp, and the vital essence of life swiftly ebbed away from him. What is happening? Tyson sensed something was amiss, yet the dim lighting rendered him momentarily disoriented. He observed Mo Yuan casually tossing Beck aside, who lay unconscious on the ground. In the obscurity, Mo Yuan's stark white teeth, coupled with the dripping blood, appeared particularly terrifying. Tyson was bewildered by the transformation in Mo Yuan, but his instinct for survival compelled him to strike with his fists. Mo Yuan met his attack head-on, and their fists collided. Tyson staggered back 3 steps before regaining his balance. This revelation shocked Tyson greatly, for he prided himself on being the strongest among the 3. Guard! Someone please! Recognizing he was outmatched, Tyson shouted for the Mildeguards. Mo Yuan advanced a step, delivering a punch aimed at Tyson's face. The speed of the blow was astonishing. Tyson barely sensed a rush of wind before he felt a solid impact, shattering even his reinforced jaw, rendering him speechless. Mo Yuan then seized Tyson, sinking his teeth into his neck and greedily drawing forth his lifeblood. Tyson struggled fiercely, but Mo Yuan's grip was as unyielding as iron. Escape was futile. Tyson's gaze gradually dulled, a pleading expression emerging in his eyes. Mo Yuan, unable to meet his gaze, only intensified his sanguine feast. After approximately the duration of 2 loaves of bread, Tyson remained utterly still. Mo Yuan released him, settling into a cross-legged position on the ground, silently assimilating the energy he had just absorbed. The blood he consumed was not merely a replenishment for his body. Rather, it transformed into a free-flowing energy that permeated his every limb and sinew. With unwavering focus, Mo Yuan devoted himself to sensing the dynamics of this energy, gradually experiencing life in an entirely new manner within his heart. It felt as though he could perceive the passage of time, feel the shifting of stars, witness the demise of cells within him, and most importantly, grasp the omnipresent, enigmatic energy of the universe. Various extraordinary techniques for harnessing this energy flooded his mind, a torrent of thoughts that he could scarcely discern. After an indeterminate period, Mo Yuan rose once more, aware that the trajectory of his existence would henceforth be altered. A year prior, the Millerans had arrived on Earth, unleashing a peculiar ray that caused the planet's temperature to plummet by 15 degrees within just 3 months, plunging Earth back into an ice age. 30% of the global population perished. The Millerans demanded that Earth submit to their dominion, threatening humanity with annihilation otherwise. Reluctantly, humanity acquiesced to their demands. Subsequently, waves of individuals were transported to space stations and ships orbiting Earth, where the Millerans conducted brutal experiments and modifications on them, while the survivors were cast into the vastness of the cosmos. Mo Yuan, at the time of the Milleran invasion, was a carefree youth of merely 20 years. It was only 3 months ago that he drew the fateful lot of being a slave. Child, what I share with you today pertains to the future of humanity. Upon receiving the news, his father was not taken aback. Instead, he led him to the basement and presented him with a round piece of ancient jade, intricately carved with a lifelike flying dragon. The future of humanity? How could that be? What on earth was this? Mo Yuan was utterly perplexed. Listen to me, his father began. There have been predictions about everything that is transpiring today. Humanity must learn the technology of extraterrestrials to triumph over them. This ancient jade will bestow upon you unimaginable power. Now, extend your hand. His father murmured an incantation in a tongue Mo Yuan could not comprehend, then pressed the jade forcefully against his palm. A wave of searing heat enveloped him as the jade fused into Mo Yuan's flesh. Remember, you must draw your energy from blood. Do not hesitate. For the future of our kind, sacrifices must be made. When you face the aliens, endure. The most crucial thing is to survive, his father cautioned. 3 months had elapsed since his arrival here. During this time, Mo Yuan came to understand that his father had not deceived him. He discovered that the peculiar language his parents had taught him since childhood was indeed the tongue of the Millardians. Thus, it seemed that someone had foreseen the events unfolding today. Yet, he had refrained from unleashing the power of the jade. On one hand, he feared succumbing to the fate of a vampire. On the other, becoming one would necessitate a relentless thirst for blood. A task evidently difficult to fulfill aboard an alien spacecraft. Had he not been driven to the brink, he might have continued to endure in silence. The inescapable specter of death ultimately propelled him toward his destiny. Mo Yuan once again examined his body. Due to the stimulation from the alien potion, his physical prowess had reached a terrifying level, yet simultaneously, the internal balance of his body had been severely disrupted. The Mildar employed a tyrannical approach, seeking solely to unleash human potential within a short span of time. According to his estimations, he had at most 10 years left to live. 10 years, he resolved to survive and return. Stealing a glance at the corpses on the ground, Mo Yuan dragged them together, creating the illusion of mutual combat. This tactic was exceedingly clumsy, yet he trusted that the guards, who viewed humans as mere cattle, would not scrutinize the scene too closely. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Mo Yuan knew that yet another experiment was about to commence. Upon entering the laboratory, Mo Yuan sensed an unusual atmosphere permeating the air. A squad of unfamiliar Mildar soldiers stood within the room. Unlike the guards aboard this spacecraft, these individuals were completely enveloped in attire that left only their eyes exposed. Their garments gleamed with a metallic sheen, yet did not appear cumbersome. Each soldier wielded an energy gun in hand and had a short sword sheathed at their back. A colossal mask was emblazoned across their chests. Among these figures, several Earthlings felt a twinge of unease, but Mo Yuan maintained his composure. Clearly, an important figure had arrived. Scanning the room, he indeed noticed a stranger, a middle-aged man, standing beside the laboratory supervisor, the malevolent woman. The Mildar bore a resemblance to humans. They were tall and fair-skinned, with men often sporting a pair of small mustaches while women typically wore their hair long. The middle-aged man exuded an imposing aura, with a prominent nose and features that unmistakably indicated his elevated status. He cast a glance at Mo Yuan and addressed the woman beside him, Supervisor Lin. Have you truly spent months only to produce such worthless specimens? The woman named Lin was tall, with exquisite features and a strikingly beautiful visage, yet her methods were ruthless, having taken countless lives over the past few months. At the man's remarks, she felt a flicker of displeasure and retorted, "Is the general implying that we have not been diligent in our duties? The quality of these Earthlings is deplorable. Over half have perished with merely 3 types of catalysts. And only the few before us can withstand the 4th type. Look how terrified they are." She paused, slightly astonished. The general also noted her expression. Indeed, the lad in the center displays a semblance of courage. Mo Yuan listened attentively to their conversation, feigning fear to lower the alien's guard, yet an inexplicable anger simmered within him. The torment endured over the past months inciting his ire, which manifested in a stubborn expression on his face. This lad possesses a bit of spirit. Perhaps I shall let my battle beast have some fun. It has been ages since I had a satisfactory slave. The general chuckled lightly. Lin hesitated, but, General, our production is already insufficient. If Lord Cello urges us, it will be difficult for us to justify. The general replied, I merely wish to toy with a slave. Why do you resist? Losing him will not hinder our mineral output. He promptly commanded the soldiers to escort Mo Yuan out of the room. Upon arriving at the arena of servitude, one is met with towering fences reaching heights of 5 to 6 meters, enclosing a colossal metal box at its center. This imposing structure, measuring approximately 5 to 6 meters in length and 3 to 4 meters in height, periodically emits thunderous roars that send shivers down one's spine. A group of soldiers forcefully thrust Mo Yuan into the enclosure, hastily securing the gates behind him. The general, wielding a remote control, stands enthusiastically behind Mo Yuan, accompanied by Lin and several officers from the vessel. Mo Yuan is engulfed by anxiety. The circumstances suggest that whatever resides within that box is formidable indeed. However, the power of his bloodline cannot be displayed under such scrutiny. He must rely on his alien-enhanced physique to contend with the creature. This body, he muses, possesses physical attributes roughly double that of an exceptional human. As he contemplates his strategy, the general presses a button on the remote control. The metal box swings open, revealing a monstrous beast, over 3 meters tall and 4 to 5 meters long, with the head of a lion and the body of a bull, adorned with a single horn atop its head. The creature shakes its head, adjusting to the light, and upon spotting Mo Yuan, charges forth with a powerful leap. Mo Yuan internally curses the general for his inhumanity, having summoned him to battle a beast without providing any weaponry. It appears the general is intent on witnessing his gruesome demise at the hands of the monster. As the beast closes in, Mo Yuan rolls to the side, narrowly evading the direct assault. Laughter erupts from beyond the fence, with a voice calling out, "Devour him! Devour him!" It seems that beast fighting is a beloved pastime in Mierda, often organized by the aristocracy for the entertainment of the masses. In the arena, the lines between humanity blur, and the excitement incites the soldiers to cheer boisterously, oblivious to their commanding officer's presence. Mo Yuan executed a series of somersaults, landing deftly behind the monstrous creature. As he stood upright, the beast thrust its hind legs backward, delivering a brutal kick to his abdomen. The impact felt akin to being struck by a heavy vehicle, propelling Mo Yuan uncontrollably through the air until he tumbled several times on the ground, finally colliding with a metallic crate, which brought him to a halt. A coppery taste surged in his throat as blood welled up in his mouth. The creature turned and charged at him, aiming a foot downwards. In this moment of peril, Mo Yuan instinctively curled his body, managing to slip beneath the creature's belly. He threw a punch, but the beast remained unscathed. Instead, a sharp pain shot through his fist. The monster bellowed in fury, stomping wildly beneath him, although Mo Yuan refrained from employing the secret techniques of the vampire clan. His agility and reflexes had significantly enhanced since his transformation, allowing him to narrowly evade the creature's colossal hooves, much to the delight of the onlookers outside the barrier. Seeing its attempts thwarted, the beast retreated a few paces, then charged again, intent on ramming Mo Yuan with its head. Taking a deep breath, he seized the opportunity to brace both hands against the creature's skull, executing a flip to mount its head. He extended his fingers, aiming for the beast's eyes, but found his reach inadequate, and the creature's relentless bucking thwarted his efforts, causing his fingers to merely graze its forehead. The monster grew increasingly enraged, leaping in place, attempting to dislodge Mo Yuan. Yet, he clung tightly to its single horn, refusing to let go. Suddenly, a realization struck him. This horn was the perfect weapon. With renewed determination, he grasped the horn tightly, channeling the energy of his vampire lineage, glancing around with a sidelong gaze. The general observed with keen interest, while the array of officers erupted in cheers, yet the experiment's supervisor, Lin, averted her gaze, ignoring the spectacle entirely. Estimating that no one would notice his actions, Mo Yuan let out a thunderous roar, channeling his strength to violently extract the beast horn. The creature howled in agony, rolling over, forcing Mo Yuan to leap down. Without waiting for the beast to regain its footing, he rushed forward, aiming directly for its eyes, thrusting the horn with all his might, piercing through the creature's skull. The beast emitted a mournful wail, thrashing wildly, but this time, Mo Yuan had learned his lesson and swiftly rolled to the side of the enclosure. He gazed at the writhing monster in the arena, still in shock, only then realizing the fatigue that enveloped his entire being. After struggling for several minutes, the beast finally lay still. The onlookers stood in stunned silence for a while before erupting into thunderous applause. Lin fixed her astonished gaze upon Mo Yuan. The general stepped into the enclosure, clapping him on the back with vigor. "Well done, you have guts." Turning back, he declared, "This man is mine. He shall report to the Slave Legion tomorrow." In the 5th section, Lucian and Crimey, the Maladins, the new aristocrats of the cosmos, have risen to prominence over the past 3 centuries since emerging from a third-rate bright star in the Orion Arm. In this brief span, they have conquered the majority of the Milky Way, their influence extending deep into the universe. Countless planets provide them with slaves, serving as warriors, technicians, miners, and servants. Presently, it seems that no force in the universe can stand against them. Listening to the soldiers aboard the transport ship discussing their exploits, Mo Yuan initially thought they were merely boasting to intimidate him as the new recruit. However, upon encountering his comrades, he finally grasped the terrifying power humanity faced. A team of 10, hailing from 10 distinct planets. Among them, there exists a towering giant, standing at 2.5 meters, alongside a diminutive figure barely surpassing 1 meter. Some possess crimson hair and verdant skin, adorned with scales, while others are strikingly reminiscent of earthlings, with golden locks and azure eyes. "What are you gazing at, lad?" The giant growled, his dissatisfaction evident, for he deemed this novice a potential threat to the entire squad's survival. In the military, the first lesson to learn is obedience. "Do you all speak Mirdan?" Mo Yuan discovered yet another astonishing fact. "What is Mirdan?" "This is the common tongue." He mused, "How did such a verbose individual manage to join our ranks?" Unable to restrain himself, the giant swung a hefty fist towards Mo Yuan. Yet, Mo Yuan deftly evaded the blow. "Come on, boss. Hit him," cheered several onlookers. Their enthusiasm ignited. In the distance, others turned their attention, their interest piqued by the prospect of a brawl, and soon, Mo Yuan and the giant found themselves encircled. Teach this rookie a lesson. It seemed that the cosmos held an even greater reverence for raw violence than Earth. Mo Yuan thought, dodging another swing from the giant, and proclaimed loudly, "Stop." The giant, puzzled, questioned, "Are you afraid, lad?" Mo Yuan replied with a smile, "Here, fights are one-on-one, though group brawls are permitted." He made his stance clear. He feared being overwhelmed by several opponents, preferring to concede from the outset rather than face humiliation. For the mission he bore. What was humiliation in the grand scheme? Humph. In our ranks, strength determines leadership. Have you ever seen a team with two captains? The giant scoffed. Mo Yuan contemplated silently. It was merely his first day, and naturally, he had yet to witness anything. You claim that you consume excrement daily, yet I cannot counter your assertion. It appeared that this giant was a specimen of robust physique. With this thought in mind, he feigned a kick and swiftly maneuvered to the rear of the giant, preparing to trip him as he turned. To his surprise, despite the giant's towering stature, he exhibited remarkable agility. He spun around even faster than Mo Yuan anticipated, stepping down firmly on Mo Yuan's foot, followed by a punch aimed at his nose. The impact was staggering, as if his nasal bones had shattered, blood swirling before his eyes, awakening his primal instincts for combat. In that moment, he disregarded the giant's significant height advantage and retaliated with a direct strike. The giant, witnessing such audacity, presumed Mo Yuan had lost his senses and, elated, threw a punch of his own. When their fists collided, the outcome was astonishing. The giant's knuckles split apart, causing him to stagger back 3 steps. Seizing the opportunity, Mo Yuan advanced 2 steps and delivered a powerful kick straight to the giant's groin. The giant fell, unable to rise for a considerable time. Who else wishes to engage? Mo Yuan bellowed, exuding an aura of ferocity. Anyone observing would understand that engaging him would be akin to facing an enraged beast. Thus, in that fleeting moment, Mo Yuan established himself as the leader of this small group of 10. "It's time to eat," someone shouted, and soon after, a few slaves arrived, pulling a small delivery cart. The slave soldiers lined up according to their squad, taking turns to receive their rations. Mo Yuan noticed that the food was identical to what they had in their cells, bread made from insects, doing little to stimulate his appetite. In truth, since becoming part of the bloodline, his craving for blood far surpasses that for ordinary sustenance. These past few days without the ability to feed, he has found his concentration waning, which has contributed to his disadvantage in the confrontation with the giants. Upon glancing up, he noticed the 9 members of his squad gazing at him curiously. "Why are you looking at me? Go ahead and eat," he urged. A slender young man with golden hair and fair skin spoke up. "Boss, if you don't eat, we can't eat either." "Oh, I didn't realize the hierarchy within the Milda army was so rigid," he remarked as he casually picked up a piece of bread and took a bite, prompting everyone to dig in. "By the way, you are a Milda, aren't you?" Mo Bai inquired, puzzled by the young man's resemblance to the other Milda, raising doubts in his mind. "Isn't this a slave legion?" The young man responded affirmatively, though he now found himself in a position worse than that of the wretched tyrant worms. A burly man laughed heartily, delivering a playful kick to the young man, who shot him an angry glare before lowering his head. "Enough. What nobility do you claim to possess?" Mo Yuan interjected. "We are all slaves here. None of us has the right to mock another." "What exactly is your story?" the golden-haired youth asked, looking at Mo Yuan with gratitude. It turned out he was once a noble of Milda, but after committing a crime, his family was stripped of their status. To clear his name, he voluntarily joined the slave legion to fight. "Joining the slave legion can absolve your sins?" Mo Yuan inquired, astonished. "Boss, where do you come from?" The surrounding individuals regarded him with incredulous expressions. Mo Yuan sheepishly replied, "Earth." "What is that place?" "I've never heard of it," they responded, bewildered. "How long did you resist the Murdarians?" The crowd exchanged opinions, and when they learned that the Earthlings had surrendered without any resistance, disdain was evident on every face. Mo Yuan felt a surge of frustration, yet found himself at a loss for words. He hastily consumed his bread and retreated to his makeshift quarters, which were little more than a shelter constructed from several alloy panels, indistinguishable from a prison cell, lying upon the unforgiving alloy surface. He marveled at how effortlessly others fell into slumber. Clearly, The physical prowess of Earthlings was rather feeble in the vastness of the cosmos. The only other person awake was a golden-haired youth named Creamy. Noticing that everyone else had succumbed to sleep, he stealthily approached and whispered in Mo Yuan's ear, "Shh. Be quiet. You're a psychic, aren't you?" "What do you mean?" Mo Yuan inquired, his caution piqued. "Do you think my noble lineage comes without merit? Today, during your bout with that giant Lucian, your final punch was undeniably infused with psychic energy. Those ignorant, lowly beings couldn't perceive it, but how could I be deceived? To be frank, are you also a noble with a troubled past? Or do you harbor a clandestine mission? Surely, the notion of Earth is a fabrication of yours?" Mo Yuan found amusement in Creamy's presumptuousness. He seemed somewhat knowledgeable yet excessively self-assured. Such individuals were not uncommon on Earth, ineffectual science who, upon grasping a modicum of understanding, fancied themselves omniscient, often straying far from the truth. Nevertheless, this presented an opportunity. He possessed no knowledge of the Merdarian societal structure and could extract valuable information from Creamy. "The insights you possess are quite impressive," Mo Yuan murmured, lowering his voice. "It is sufficient to know oneself, without the need to voice it. Surely, you are aware of our most renowned family among the Merdalians, correct?" Creamy boasted. "Hey, you underestimate me too much. I hail from the Sebi clan. Thus, you two belong to one of the three prominent families? Is it the Delurus or the Yulian clan? Given the manner in which your spiritual energy flows, it starkly contrasts with that of the Delurus family. You must be from the Yulian clan. Have you encountered any troubles?" Mo Yuan chuckled inwardly, without uttering a word. This naive lad had divulged all the information. Following his lead, Mo Yuan replied, "As you are aware, our family has recently encountered some matters." This statement was deliberately ambiguous. For Mo Yuan contemplated that as a distinguished family, there is seldom a time without trivial disputes. If his interlocutor claimed knowledge, he would deftly elicit further information. Should the other exhibit confusion, it would merely indicate a lack of experience. Such noble scions are particularly sensitive to being deemed ignorant, and in a bid to salvage their pride, they will undoubtedly reveal more. Indeed, Creamy first displayed a puzzled expression, only to subsequently grasp the situation. "Oh, I see. It is said that a few of your family's spiritual practitioners met an inexplicable demise 2 months ago. So you are." Mo Yuan spat bitterly. "Those vile wretches, I shall avenge myself one day." As he uttered these words, recalling the harrowing experiences he had endured prior to his arrival, his tone naturally resonated with authenticity. Creamy, devoid of any suspicion, was convinced that Mo Yuan was a casualty of familial strife, and he felt an involuntary kinship towards him, thereby sharing freely. Mo Yuan effortlessly discerned that the Merdalian society was characterized by a stringent hierarchy. Typically, there exists a profound chasm between the nobility and the common folk, with the higher echelons of aristocracy rarely mingling with the lower classes. In the realm of Milda, supreme authority is vested in an hereditary leader and a council elected by the nobility, with each institution serving as a check on the other. The Milda people have established settlements on over 300 planets. If one includes the mining planets and military strongholds under Milda's dominion, the total becomes incalculable. Countless worlds within the cosmos have succumbed to Milda's colonial ambitions, providing them with soldiers and servitors. The Milda military is predominantly divided into 2 main branches, the Navy and the Army. Mo Yuan belongs to the Army Slave Legions, a unit entirely composed of slaves sourced from various colonies, equipped solely with light weaponry and subjected to rudimentary military training. Their responsibilities entail suppressing insurrections across the colonies and serving as cannon fodder in large-scale military engagements. At this juncture, Creamy expressed his bewilderment, remarking, "Boss, it seems as though you are oblivious to everything." As a noble and a member of one of the 3 prominent families, Mo Yuan pondered how to respond. And a sudden insight struck him. "You are aware that I am a psychic. What means will they not resort to in order to counter me? If overt actions are ineffective, they will resort to covert tactics. To be frank, had I not been poisoned, I would not have found myself in this predicament. My memories have faded, and all that occupies my mind is an intense hatred for those enemies." Creamy nodded in understanding. "I comprehend now. Once we survive our 3rd mission, we shall return to Miviel and exact our revenge." This tactic, often employed in romantic dramas, surprisingly proved successful with Creamy. Mo Yuan could not help but think that if all Milda inhabitants were as thoughtless, they would be far easier to confront. Once more, the question arose, what does it mean to complete 3 missions? A soldier in the Slave Legion can regain their freedom after surviving 3 combat missions. with the option to return to their homeland or reside on planets under the control of the Mild. Those who perform admirably may even have the opportunity to join the regular army. Furthermore, for those with a criminal past, joining the Slave Legion erases all prior offenses. Creamy patiently elucidated this process. It was then that Mo Yuan grasped the concept of absolution, exclaiming, 3 missions, is it? That seems rather straightforward. However, Creamy's expression shifted to one of alarm. Boss, the casualty rate for these missions exceeds 90. You must understand. Our original squad of 10 was completely annihilated in the last mission. The current members are all new recruits. Surviving even 1 out of 3 missions is a remarkable feat. At that moment, he realized that he might be cursing either the boss or himself, and promptly fell silent. Mo Yuan sought to reassure him. Fear not. With our exceptional talents, we shall undoubtedly be among the fortunate 10. Ah, boss, it seems you misunderstood. I meant that only 10 of participants survive each mission. Creamy corrected him. Mo Yuan was left speechless. The following day, he commenced his first military training since joining the Mild army. The Mild operate on a 30-hour day, with each hour mirroring Earth's 60 minutes, and every minute comprising 60 seconds. Their year consists of 300 days divided into 15 months, faced with a projectile firearm. Mo Yuan felt utterly lost. Excuse me, has anyone here used this device? He inquired. How does one operate it? I have never seen one before. I wield my knife at home. Everyone has fully revealed their rookie selves. Ignorant fellows. Ignoring the furious gazes around him, Creamy picked up a firearm and skillfully manipulated it. Look, you attach the magazine here at the bottom, in this spot. Each standard magazine holds 90 rounds. Now, this is the safety. And here you can adjust the firing mode. In rapid fire mode, you can unleash a torrent of 30 rounds in succession, like a downpour. Hey, you two from the desert planet have never witnessed rain, have you? All right. Let's get serious. Mo Yuan quickly intervened, sensing the growing urge among the onlookers to pummel him. Although Crimey's words were irksome, he was the only one in this squad well-versed in weaponry. And with his noble lineage from the Milda family, Mo Yuan sought to cultivate a favorable relationship with him. After gaining a preliminary understanding of the projectile weapons operation, Mo Yuan approached the shooting range to test it. Peering through the sight, he gauged that the holographic target was approximately 100 meters away. With a slight adjustment, he unleashed a flurry of bullets, all of which missed the target. The sound of the computer announcing a miss echoed in his ears. Laughter erupted among the crowd. Then, one by one, they stepped up to take their shots. Most managed to hit the target only 2 or 3 times, with Creamy achieving the best performance, all 30 shots striking the target. Following him was the giant Lucian, who hit 22 times. Hunting is such an elegant sport. You country bumpkins have surely never partaken in it, Creamy boasted. However, after being patted on the shoulder by Lucian, he refrained from further chatter. As Mo Yuan observed the nearby group still grappling with the use of firearms, after all, their team lacked an individual of Creamy's caliber, he remarked, this military training is rather haphazard. Isn't there anyone to instruct us? Creamy offered a wry smile. Typically, there would be instructors to provide training, but today, perhaps they deemed it unnecessary to expend energy on a lot of dead men. Mo Yuan opened his mouth, ready to respond, when the hatch swung open, and an officer brandishing an energy gun bellowed, "You worthless lot, assemble in the strike pod in 10 minutes. The landing operation is about to commence." Chapter 7. Descent. Listen. During the forthcoming landing operation, you must heed my commands. I have no desire to perish alongside you inferior beings, Creamy admonished as he donned his combat attire. Mo Yuan retorted, Creamy, must you always be so insufferable? I'm not referring to you, my friend. However, I am the only one here adept in military strategy. If you charge recklessly upon landing, you are as good as doomed. Those Sioux tribesmen are no trifling adversaries. A thought struck Mo Yuan. What? Do you possess insight into our mission? Creamy's pride swelled. Of course. Do you not realize who I am? But let us speak calmly. No need for violence. He evaded Lucian's punch and continued. Before my arrival, this operation had already commenced. The Sioux tribe revolted a year ago, rebelling against our glorious and sacred rule. General Gomes suffered a catastrophic defeat during his first expedition, securing only a minor foothold on the surface of Tim-3. 2 months ago, I heard that the Sioux people launched a large-scale assault on this stronghold. Beyond that, I am unaware of the subsequent events. I surmise that our current mission is to provide them with assistance. Otherwise, there would be no urgency, and we would not forego even the most basic military training. A fellow named Taka interjected, What use are we? Are we merely marching to our deaths? Creamy scoffed. Indeed, The unworldly lower beings have no vision. If you cannot shoot, surely you can at least throw a grenade, can you not? Just wait. We shall soon be equipped. The command center requires us to simply spot the enemy and hurl our projectiles. Even if it costs us 10 lives for one of theirs, it is worth the sacrifice. A profound silence enveloped the group, and no one paid heed to Creamy's tone. Before long, trucks laden with ammunition arrived, primarily crates of grenades. Do not gather too many. Creamy instructed, blocking Lucian's attempts. Like me, each person shall take 10 grenades. Here, this spot in the tactical vest is for the grenade pouch. The surplus 5 should be secured on your back with this strap. Now, each of you take 5 grenades. Do not take more, lest your movements become hindered. Mori, you little dwarf, take 2 fewer grenades. The chief and Lucian may take a few extra. Ah, there is even a small grenade launcher. Lucian, you should carry it. And I shall teach you how to use it. As the group listened to Creamy's allocation, they quickly armed themselves. Mo observed the other squad still in disarray, pondering. Surely, my chances of survival have significantly increased now. Once we reach the battlefield, I must strive to refrain from utilizing blood energy. Creamy refers to it as psychic energy. If it attracts the attention of other Mildeans, it could prove detrimental. On one side of the strike pod, a holographic projection of the battlefield flickered to life. The Milda fleet was deploying its first batch of assault craft. A multitude of aircraft departed from the fleet, gathering beyond the atmosphere of Timmy 3. In that moment, countless pinpricks of light shimmered in the vast blackness of space, resembling a celestial ocean. This artificial galaxy elicited awe from all on board. Moments later, clusters of lights descended into the atmosphere of Timmy 3, where they danced and soared. Timmy 3 is a planet slightly larger than Earth, with 2 continents enveloped by boundless seas. On the northern continent lies the sole stronghold of the Milda people. The 7,713th Infantry Regiment stationed there had endured a siege for over 40 days, with most base structures having fallen, leaving survivors to desperately cling to the remnants of their shattered fortifications. Today, General Gomes arrived with a formidable fleet, determined to rescue his most loyal subordinates. Air superiority within the atmosphere had been secured at 85, and surface bombardment commenced. The central computer of the warship relayed real-time battle updates. With so many aircraft deployed, those traitors should be reduced to mere ashes. The diminutive Mori exclaimed with excitement. At that moment, the surface of the northern continent lay shrouded beneath layers of dark clouds. Even from the distant expanse of space, one could envision the magnitude of the bombardment. Creamy gently shook his head. I have heard that the structures of the Sioux are built deep underground. Last time, we suffered greatly because of this. I wonder how many heavy bombers they have prepared this time, but from my earlier observation, it seemed that only air superiority fighters and a few light bombers were launched from our ship. I am uncertain about the situation with the other vessels. As soon as he finished speaking, a deep and powerful male voice resonated through the battleship's broadcast system. Brave warriors, I am Commander Gomes of this expedition. Today, you shall fight for the glory of the Empire and for your freedom. Let those despicable traitors feel the fury of your wrath. Let them face judgment from the heavens. Our battleship is immensely powerful. Our aircraft can shroud their skies, and our warriors will bring them death and lamentation. You, soldiers of the 2nd Legion of Slaves, are the vanguard of our entire army, tasked with implementing the sacred will of King Milda and the Council on this planet. With the support of the 1,823rd Armored Regiment, believe that you shall be invincible. Armored troops, we have armored support. The slave soldiers erupted in cheers. Frankly, the only inspiring aspect of this pre-battle rally was its final sentence. It baffles me why the leaders fail to grasp the virtue of brevity. This flaw manifests on Earth as well as among extraterrestrials. Without further delay, the surface bombardment concluded, and the assault team boarded the ship. The announcement echoed through the air as the slave soldiers climbed aboard the nearby transport vessels. The Gremmel-class transport ship, the standard landing craft of the Milda, features a somewhat rectangular hull capable of accommodating 100 fully armed slave soldiers, 20 heavy assault troops, or 4 Reaver-class main battle tanks. The transport ship embarked. The hatch opened, revealing a vast, dark expanse before everyone's eyes. Turning back, Mo experienced for the first time the formidable might of the Milda battleship. Before us lies a battleship, resembling a diminutive city on Earth, flanked on either side by a formidable lineup of over 10 warships. The smallest measuring approximately 2,000 meters in length and 500 meters in width. Behind them, a multitude of lights flicker, yet due to the limitations of our vision, the specifics remain obscured. Something feels amiss. According to our Navy's standard tactics, surface bombardment should persist for no less than 2 hours before an assault is sanctioned. Why, then, has the landing operation commenced so swiftly? Crimey pondered aloud. Perhaps those on the ground are simply too feeble, chuckled Luxian. Silence. A commanding officer bellowed, scolding them. What do you wretched slaves know of generals' tactics? All you need to do is fight valiantly. The captain of the tactical squad within the Milda Slave Legion is typically elected by the slaves themselves, where the strongest among them assumes leadership, while officers of company rank and above are appointed from the regular military, facilitating command and ensuring discipline. Approximately 20 minutes later, the transport vessel breached the planet's atmosphere. The officer declared, "Our regiment's mission is to clear out the enemy's underground tunnels. We must drag those rat-like Sioux people out and ruthlessly sever their tails." As he delineated the tasks, the communicator suddenly erupted with the pilot's panicked exclamation, "Enemy aircraft." A cacophony of static ensued, and the unsettling news within the ship's communicator grew increasingly alarming. In the coordinates of 30-50, enemy aircraft were detected, 3 squadrons expected to make contact in 5 minutes. Where on earth did these Sioux fighters emerge from? The urgency was palpable. Where are the fighter jets? We require assistance. The slave soldiers felt a creeping dread. Mo Yuan scanned his surroundings, noting the pallor on many faces. Were they to perish in the skies before even confronting the foe? Anxiety gnawed his heart. A voice broke through the tension. The command center has issued an order for an emergency airdrop. I repeat, an emergency airdrop. What? Do they intend to kill us? Kalami shouted. Silence. The officer barked. Suddenly, the transport ship dove, causing the occupants to sway precariously. The hatch flung open, and the officer stood at the threshold, shouting, "Jump. Jump quickly. Anyone who hesitates will face severe punishment upon return." They were still at least 20 meters above ground, and the slave soldiers exchanged glances, none daring to leap. The officer, frustrated, seized one of the soldiers, intending to push him out. However, a gust of wind caught them off guard, and both tumbled out together. This incident serves as a reminder, when standing at the hatch, one must secure their safety harness. Mo Yuan jested, for he maintained an optimistic demeanor even in dire circumstances. Hey, brothers, I shall take my leave first. I can't allow the rubbish of Myrta to mock me from below. Lucian strode forward and leapt into the void. Who is the rubbish? Clarify that. Kalami retorted, springing after him from the transport ship. Mo Yuan also rose to his feet, declaring, to be executed upon return or to leap down and eliminate foes. I must confess, I find the latter option far more appealing. With that, he leapt down. The enslaved soldiers, left with no alternative, followed suit and jumped from the spacecraft. Chapter 8. The initial battle. Mo Yuan's entire body ached. Although his combat suit provided a degree of shock absorption, landing in a muddy terrain after a fall from over 20 meters was no trifling matter. Yet, this was the battlefield. He could not help but mutter a complaint about the contemptible disregard the Milda had for the enslaved soldiers as he hastily surveyed his surroundings. Fortunately, there was no ongoing combat, and those emerging from the muck were all comrades. The gravity of this planet was 1.5 times that of Earth, which posed no significant challenge to Mo Yuan's current physical condition. After a few minutes, he managed to gather his squad. According to the command from headquarters, we were to advance southeast, approximately 5 miles away, where 1 Milda mile equates to 2 kilometers on Earth, where we would rendezvous with the 1st Company of the 1823rd Armored Regiment. Then, we would continue moving due east. We must reach this point before nightfall. Mo Yuan pointed to the map on his personal combat data device, indicating a location identified by satellite reconnaissance as an entrance to a Sioux tunnel, where we would commence our extermination operations. He sighed, pondering how long it would take for the others to regroup. Observing the disarray among the Allied troops around him, Mo Yuan felt a twinge of dissatisfaction. Excuse me, which squad are you from? Someone called out from a distance. We are from the 2nd squad. What about you? Mo Yuan responded. Suddenly, the earth trembled, and amidst the swirling dust, a severed arm spiraled upwards, tracing a parabolic arc before landing before Mo Yuan. The nerves of the arm had not yet completely ceased functioning, twitching spasmodically. Mo Yuan stared blankly at the dismembered limb, rendered speechless. Lucien, Crimey, and the others were equally transfixed. Many years later, Mo Yuan would still vividly recall that moment. A living, breathing individual, engaged in conversation, simply ceased to exist, leaving behind nothing but a severed hand, devoid of any identity, vanishing into oblivion. Although he would encounter far more brutal deaths in the future, the first experience remained indelibly etched in his memory. The ground continued to tremble, and the sound of explosions reverberated relentlessly. Enemy attack. At long last, someone reacted. Panic ensued as everyone scrambled for cover. Mo Yuan was dragged by Taka to hide behind a stone. Before him danced severed limbs. While the air was filled with the anguished cries of comrades, blood pooled into streams, and visceral remains blanketed the earth. As these newly deployed soldiers confronted the stark reality of war, the Sioux people are advancing. A voice shouted amidst the chaos. Mo Yuan peered from behind the stone. On the horizon, he discerned a cluster of dark figures shifting ominously, the air crackling with the sound of projectiles. At this juncture, the bombardment had ceased, and the slave soldiers cautiously emerged from their cover, firing at the encroaching shadows. However, these soldiers were poorly trained, and with their commander missing during the airborne assault, their counterfire was sparse and ineffective. The enemy's numbers remained unchanged, closing in swiftly. This was untenable, Climby shouted in desperation, urging the brothers of the second squad to follow his instructions, to step forward and form an orderly line for alternating fire. Do not be afraid. Their firepower is not concentrated. He repeated this several times, yet no one stepped forward. Within just a few minutes, the Sioux people had closed in significantly, their figures becoming distinctly visible. Mo Yuan adjusted the firing mode to contact mode, peered out, and unleashed a brief 3-round burst before swiftly retreating. He had managed to deplete 2 magazines, uncertain if he had struck any of the enemy. Just as he replaced the 3rd magazine and leaned out again, a bullet whizzed past his face, the rush of air raising goosebumps on his skin. A scream erupted from behind him. A glance revealed a soldier whose face had been obliterated, with only a gruesome mass of blood and flesh remaining where his nose and mouth once were. With trembling hands, he switched to rapid-fire mode, unleashing a torrential barrage of bullets. Several adversaries collapsed to the ground. A wave of indescribable exhilaration surged within Mo Yuan. Alas, the momentum had not yet waned. Those remaining adversaries rolled and scrambled back to their feet, revealing their tactical evasion. At this rate, I shall perish. Just as Mo Yuan was gripped with fear, Lu Zian leaped forth, firing his weapon while bellowing, "Damn it, you cowards. If you wish to live, step forward." His fervent charge felled 2 enemies instantly, causing the remaining foes to hastily evade, their speed severely hampered. It was now or never. With a mighty roar, Mo Yuan leapt out as well, positioning himself beside Lu Zian to fire. Climby emerged alongside the 2 others, the trio of firearms forming a fan-shaped barrage, momentarily suppressing the enemy's firepower. Observing that the 3 were unharmed, the other slave soldiers rushed forth. They arranged themselves into 3 rows, alternating their shots. The fierce gunfire pinned the Sioux tribe down in an open area 200 meters ahead. Although the slave soldiers' marksmanship was initially abysmal, warfare is not akin to target practice. When they amassed sufficient firepower density and executed continuous shooting effectively, individual accuracy became less critical. In the midst of the relentless hail of bullets, few dared to test their fate. Mo Yuan seemed to grasp a fragment of the essence of warfare, yet the intensity of battle left little room for contemplation. At that moment, having replaced a magazine, he was about to advance and take over for a comrade in the front line when several projectiles suddenly flew towards him. In an instant, smoke enveloped the area, and indistinct figures advanced swiftly. 2 anguished cries pierced the air, revealing a gap in the front line. Mo Yuan charged forward, raising his weapon and unleashing a flurry of shots into the haze. A muffled thud echoed in his ears as Climby collapsed. A blade-like weapon emerged from the smoke, slicing towards him. At this juncture, Mo Yuan cast aside any thoughts of concealing his strength. On the battlefield, it was a matter of fighting with all one's might, risking life for life. He discarded his firearm, channeling the bloodline energy within him, conjuring a crimson long blade into his hand. With a swift motion, he deflected the adversary's weapon. Then, in a fluid movement along the blade, he severed the head of his opponent amidst the swirling smoke. With a swift motion, he repelled the 2 adversaries at his side, then executed a roll across the ground. The tip of his long blade shimmered with a crimson glow, and amidst the cries of pain, he severed 3 or 4 legs. The other soldiers drew their issued short knives, engaging in a fierce melee. Lu Zian displayed exceptional bravery. Under his blade, no opponent stood a chance. With a single stroke, he carved a graceful arc, slicing through the throat of an enemy soldier, who collapsed silently to the earth. It was evident that he had mastered a particular style of swordsmanship. As the last foe fell before Ma Yuan, the smoke began to dissipate, revealing the true appearance of the enemies. These people from the Sioux tribe in the Mirador had little difference from earthlings in visage, though they were generally of shorter stature. Among the corpses, the tallest barely reached 1 meter 80, while most were around 1 meter 70. Mo Yuan observed a black brand on the side of each enemy's neck, pondering. Is this the insignia of their regiment, branded upon their flesh? A soldier named Mirlu approached to examine closer, stating, "This is the mark of a slave." Ma Yuan responded, "Are you suggesting that those we battled were all slaves?" Several around him nodded in agreement. Just then, a voice emerged from the pile of bodies, cursing, "Bastards. I'll fight you to the end." A Sioux tribesman, with both legs broken, strained to activate a concealed device, propelling himself with great effort into the air, leaping over 2 meters into the throng of combatants. It was a desperate act of self-sacrifice. On the ground, Kalimi sprang up, rolling and scrambling away to escape the chaos. Chapter 9, The Battlefield, Part 1. Mo Yuan swung his blade, severing the hand of a Sioux clansman with a single stroke. The hand flew away, propelled by the force of the strike. Before the surrounding soldiers could cheer, the Sioux clansman, with his remaining hand, drew a pistol from his bosom. Danger loomed. A figure lunged forward, grappling with the Sioux clansman. In the ensuing chaos, a gunshot rang out, and the Sioux clansman fell, slain by his assailant. The slave soldiers, momentarily regaining their composure, then noticed the blood gushing from Lucian's abdomen. It was he who had shielded Mo Yuan from the bullet, sacrificing himself in the process. Mo Yuan glanced back and estimated that about 30 of the slave soldiers still possessed combat capability, alongside 5 or 6 wounded. He shouted, "Those who wish to survive, regroup. Climby, you shall organize them into squads." It was thanks to Lucian and Mo Yuan's courage in that perilous moment that the unit had not been entirely decimated. A fact acknowledged by every soldier present. With Lucian gravely injured and unconscious, Mo Yuan naturally emerged as the most respected figure among the slave soldiers. Under his command, Climby arranged the remaining men into 3 squads. Mo Yuan led the front squad of 10, while Taka commanded the rear squad of 10. Climby took charge of the remaining 15, forming a central squad to assist and protect the wounded. They advanced for 3 hours, traversing approximately 6 or 7 miles, until they reached the designated meeting point with the armored units. To the dismay of the slave soldiers, they beheld only the tops of 4 or 5 armored vehicles bobbing amidst a marshland. Are the staff officers imbeciles? Climby couldn't help but curse, bewildered that they had chosen to airdrop tanks into such treacherous terrain. Observing the tanks reduced to mere scrap metal, the expressions on everyone's faces were grim. Takata remarked, "We should halt here. Advancing any further with just the few of us would be tantamount to suicide." "Indeed, without our armored troops, we stand no chance," another concurred. "We barely managed to withstand that group of Sioux slave soldiers. Should we encounter their regular army, it would surely spell our doom." The group engaged in animated discussions. Mo Yuan glanced skyward, where the trails of fighter jets frequently crossed the horizon. The Milda Air Force was engaged in a fierce struggle for air supremacy against the Sioux aircraft. Amidst the skirmishing fighters, transport planes were laboriously attempting to drop their paratroopers. Suddenly, a missile soared through the air, striking one of the transport aircraft mid-drop, resulting in a catastrophic explosion that claimed the lives of dozens of soldiers before they could even make their mark in battle. In response, 2 Milda fighter jets charged towards the assailing Sioux aircraft. The Sioux jet swiftly ascended, carving an elegant arc in the sky, positioning itself above the Milda fighter. In a flash, a searing beam of light erupted as a Milda jet was cleanly bisected by a laser cannon, its severed fuselage spiraling downward. Meanwhile, another Milda aircraft had locked onto the Sioux jet. 2 close-range missiles screamed from the aircraft's bay as the Sioux fighter accelerated diagonally upward in a desperate bid for escape. Pursued relentlessly. Just as the missile was poised to strike, the Sioux aircraft appeared to lose power suddenly, plummeting horizontally towards the ground. The Sioux jet spiraled downward, nearing the earth, only to abruptly pull up and execute a deft turn, maneuvering behind the Milda fighter. The Milda aircraft sensed impending danger, maneuvering in the air, yet it could not escape the relentless pursuit of the Sioux faction fighters. With another blinding flash, a second Milda aircraft was shot down. The Sioux fighter circled ominously above, seemingly in a display of dominance, before unsteadily departing. "What an exceptional pilot," Crimey remarked. The slave soldiers stood in stunned silence. Mo Yuan, however, fell into deep contemplation. What could the leader be pondering? Crimey inquired, "Are all you Milda folk so foolish? Even before securing air superiority, you send your troops to certain doom." Crimey's face flushed. "We Milda are undoubtedly intelligent. Otherwise, we wouldn't have conquered vast star realms. Yet, the commander, General Gomes, seems to have made some grave error. I cannot comprehend his strategy at all." Even if our slave legion is merely cannon fodder, why would the armored troops accompany us to their demise? Mo Yuan suddenly remarked, "Did you notice that the tanks in the marsh appear to be unoccupied?" Only then did Crimey realize that those tanks indeed stood empty. If the armored soldiers had perished during the drop, there wouldn't be a single survivor. If they had left the tanks upon landing, it seemed improbable, after all. Without their vehicles, their combat effectiveness would be inferior to that of us slave soldiers. Rushing about on this enemy-infested planet would hardly be wise. The most prudent course would be to hold firm and await reinforcements. He sensed that something was amiss with this operation. Mo Yuan stated, "Regardless, we must proceed to attack as per the original plan. Trapped here, devoid of supplies, we are all destined to perish from hunger." The enslaved soldiers contemplated their dire predicament, recognizing that there was no alternative path forward. Under the command of Mo Yuan, they pressed on toward the designated extermination zone. Along the way, intermittent messages crackled through the radio. The 3rd and 4th companies, which were originally scheduled to execute the purge alongside Mo Yuan's 2nd Division, had been annihilated by the Sioux people en route. Moreover, the transport aircraft carrying the 1st company was shot down by Sioux fighter jets during their descent, leaving the remaining 6 companies of the 1st Battalion besieged by the enemy, making it exceedingly difficult to arrive at the combat location on time. This meant we had to rely solely on ourselves, Crimey said with irritation. "Crimey, you could always feign death again," Lucian, despite being supported, retorted with sarcasm. "You." Crimey blushed with embarrassment. "Enough, Lucian, conserve your energy. With just a handful of us left, if we turn against each other, we won't even need to wait for those Sioux bastards to arrive. We will all perish here," Mo Yuan admonished. Following their earlier skirmish and march, Mo Yuan exuded an aura of authority befitting an officer, calm yet commanding. The two ceased their quarrel. Suddenly, Mo exclaimed, "The forces of the 4th Corps have parachuted in ahead." The group strained to listen, and indeed, the 4th and 6th Corps, acting as the 2nd echelon, had commenced their drop. The landing zone for the 4th Corps coincided with the operational area of Mo Yuan and his men. Joy surged through the ranks, and their marching pace quickened. In the distance, large clusters of light streaked across the sky like a meteor shower, heading toward the valley ahead. As the light points drew nearer, a fleet of fighter jets revealed their menacing visages, unleashing a torrent of lethal energy from their laser cannons upon the designated drop zone. Meanwhile, the transport planes, shielded by the fighters, commenced their descent in an orderly fashion. Observing the unfolding scene, Mo Yuan gazed into the distance, where a shimmering sea of golden clouds materialized, reflecting the brilliance of the fighter jets. Why have the Sioux clan's aircraft returned? Chapter 10. The battlefield. 2 intense aerial combat erupted instantaneously. The black Milda fighters and the gray Sioux clan jets danced across the heavens, intertwining and vying to unleash deadly sparks and beams of light. Under duress, the transport planes resorted to emergency parachuting, releasing personnel directly from a certain altitude. In an instant, it rained men from the sky. It appeared that our fighter jets were at a disadvantage, Mo Yuan remarked, gazing toward the horizon. Climby nodded in agreement. "Our vessels are multifunctional cosmic fighters. While they are indeed capable of atmospheric operations, they lack the aerodynamic design of the Sioux clan's aircraft. Observe. The Sioux clan's jets are specifically engineered for the atmospheric conditions of this planet, granting them superior maneuverability, particularly evident during turns." Mo Yuan cast his eyes downward. They were situated atop a small hill, affording a panoramic view of the battlefield below. The hastily descending slave soldiers had no time to form ranks before being ambushed. Waves of Sioux clan warriors emerged from the thickets, the cliffs, and even from the ground, encircling the slave soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Amidst the blaze of gunfire, one after another, the slave soldiers fell. In numerous locations, fierce hand-to-hand combat has erupted, with slave soldiers from across the cosmos clashing with the warriors of the Sioux tribe, wielding bayonets and firearms. The valleys reverberate with the anguished curses of humanity and the harrowing screams of the dying, as crimson blood, white bones, and shattered flesh inundate the senses. The command center has issued orders for all troops to advance toward the fortress of Rustad. A new directive has arrived from the command center through Mori. The fortress of Rustad stands as the sole bastion of the Mirdar on this continent. Mo Yuan finds himself in a state of indecision. To advance toward the fortress, they must traverse the foreboding valley ahead, where the fierce battle instills trepidation. With merely over 30 weary soldiers, they risk being devoured by the Sioux tribe upon descent. Yet, failing to execute military orders could lead to severe punishment under martial law, even if they are fortunate enough to survive the aftermath. As he contemplates this dilemma, Taka suddenly points to the ground and exclaims, "Look, below the slope where they stand." An Mirror transport aircraft has silently landed on a clearing, its door opening to reveal a dozen individuals emerging in single file. At the forefront is a figure cloaked in crimson, their head concealed beneath a veil, while those behind brandish energy rifles and wield longswords. They approach what appears to be a naturally formed opening, where two Sioux tribe officers emerge to engage in conversation. The scene before them leaves the onlookers in stunned silence. No wonder this operation has encountered such difficulties. It seems we have a traitor within our ranks, remarks Creamy, fixating on the individuals below. He turns to Mo Yuan, leaning closer to whisper, "Boss, why don't we charge down now? If we can capture or eliminate that traitor, we will achieve great merit," Mo Yuan remarked. The guards beside him should be formidable. Can we, this ragtag group, truly succeed? Upon hearing this, Kalimi expressed enthusiasm. "We are launching a surprise attack. With that launcher, I shall deliver a decisive blow from above while you lead the charge below. Success is assured." Mo Yuan contemplated the situation. This was a fortuitous opportunity. And should he achieve a significant feat, he might soon shed the shackles of slavery. He nodded and summoned, "Moli, Mirlu, Taka, and you, hurry and follow me." Having selected a few companions, Mo Yuan stealthily approached the foot of the mountain, while Kalimi assembled the small launcher with a few others. "Fire swiftly." Just as the launcher was completed, Kalimi noticed the group at the mountain's base moving towards the cave. With no time to alert Mo Yuan, a projectile was released. "Charge." The deafening explosion reverberated, plunging the assault team on the mountainside into peril. Mo Yuan, acting decisively, initiated the charge. The figure in red, having engaged in conversation with the two Sioux ethnic officers and poised to enter the cave, was suddenly caught off guard by the blast, sending his nearby guards reeling in disarray. Amidst the hail of bullets, a small contingent of soldiers clad in rudimentary combat attire surged down the opposing slope. A seasoned warrior, he remained unflustered, assessing the situation and recognizing the enemy's insignificance. Dismissing them as a mere nuisance, he commanded the remaining guards to engage in battle. The surviving 7 or 8 guards and the 2 Sioux officers took cover behind the rocks and began firing at Mo Yuan and his companions. Creamy observed the enemy dispersing and urgently adjusted his angle, launching a relentless barrage of fire towards the foot of the mountain. The dense explosions rendered the individuals below unable to raise their heads, leaving several wounded in a state of stunned disbelief. Initially, Mo Yuan charged forward with his weapon drawn, firing as he advanced. However, upon realizing that he had lost track of his ammunition, he decided to cease firing altogether, instead maneuvering nimbly between the rocks, striving to close the distance between himself and the foe. The howling wind filled his ears, mingling with the anguished cries of his comrades as bullets struck their targets, tearing through flesh like ragged cloth. Yet, Mo Yuan paid no heed to these horrors. In his heart, there was but one singular focus: to approach the enemy. To draw nearer, closer, ever closer. It must be said, Creamy exhibited remarkable prowess in providing fire support, successfully suppressing the enemy's fire at the mountain's base with his precise strikes. Thanks to his accurate bombardment, Mo Yuan and his comrades only suffered the loss of 5 lives as they successfully charged down the slope. The slave soldiers hurled their projectiles, and as a guard cautiously peeked from behind a rock, poised to fire, he was gruesomely dismembered by shrapnel, his head and hands severed, causing his limp body to collapse. Mo Yuan surged over the corpses, only to be met by another guard wielding a sword. Summoning the blood energy within him, Mo Yuan swung his crimson blade, cleaving the guard's skull in half as if it were mere tofu. Taka, Mori, and others flanked from the opposite side, unleashing a continuous barrage of bullets. 2 Sioux tribe officers were torn to shreds by the onslaught of hundreds of rounds. One guard stealthily aimed at Mo Yuan, ready to pull the trigger, when a towering figure intervened. With a mighty roar, the guard was lifted high into the air and then hurled to the ground, his body crumpling upon impact amidst the explosion of debris, evidently lifeless. "Lucian, you have arrived," Mo Yuan exclaimed in delight. Lu Zian bellowed. "How can you expect me to sleep above while you are fighting so fiercely below? Lay down your weapons." Mo Yuan, having gained a semblance of control over the situation, was about to command the enemy to surrender when suddenly, a tumultuous and searing consciousness erupted within his mind. Chapter 11. Blood Battle. The excruciating pain made his head feel as though it had been struck by a heavy hammer countless times, and then pierced by thousands of needles, as if it had been doused in oil and ignited. During his time in Earth's orbit for biological experiments, he had occasionally endured intense physical pain. Yet he had never experienced a mental anguish as profound as that of the present moment. Mo Yuan's vision blurred, dimly. He could perceive the surrounding slave soldiers dropping their weapons, clutching their heads, writhing on the ground, and wailing in agony. "Who are you? How can you still stand?" The chilling voice emanated from the figure clad in red. Although it was a universal language, Mo Yuan perceived it with an entirely different resonance. It was not the pronunciation that was peculiar, nor was it the red-clad individual's vocal tone that was extraordinary. It was simply an aura, a noble essence radiating from his speech. Mo Yuan secretly compared this voice to that of General Gomez's pre-battle speeches. Indeed, Gomez's tone was robust and forceful, unmistakably the voice of a commanding general. However, the red-clad figure, through the mere sound of his voice, rendered Gomez's presence akin to that of a fierce dog. The red-clad man conveyed his extraordinary status solely through his voice, undoubtedly belonging to an ancient lineage. A noble whose family name alone could bestow glory upon the most obscure of individuals. With a series of gunshots echoing through the air, it became evident that Crimey was unable to shoot due to the chaotic mingling of the red-clad figures and Mo Yuan. He hastily descended the hillside, attempting a surprise attack. To his astonishment, the bullet striking the red-clad individual elicited no response, and soon Crimey and his companions found themselves tumbling to the ground. "Are you a psychic?" The red-clad figure continued to inquire relentlessly. Meanwhile, the excruciating pain in Mo Yuan's head intensified. With great difficulty, he managed to utter, "I am the third uncle of your mother's lover's son." "What?" The red-clad figure was momentarily taken aback, allowing his mental guard to waver slightly. This was the opportunity Mo Yuan had been awaiting. Energy surged within him, and a jet of black flame erupted from his palm, hurtling towards the red-clad figure. The red-clad individual, of noble lineage, had only interacted with those of considerable status, whether friend or foe. He had never encountered the crude and trivial language that Mo Yuan employed. Stunned, a minute gap appeared in the flow of his psychic energy, inadvertently lessening the mental pressure he exerted upon his opponent. Unexpectedly, in that fleeting moment, Mo Yuan seized the opportunity and launched a fierce counterattack. At this juncture, the red-clad figure had no time to recalibrate his focus and initiated a mental assault. He raised his hand to shield himself, conjuring a blood-red mirror shield to obstruct the path of the black flame. The two forces collided, causing the red-clad figure to stagger. Mo Yuan leaped into the air, twisting his wrist, and the black flame spiraled back, coalescing into a short spear in his grasp. Suspended mid-air, he exerted force through his right arm, thrusting the black spear with all his might, shattering the blood-red mirror shield upon impact. The figure clad in red suddenly became indistinct, resembling a flickering flame. The black gun pierced through, enveloped by the fire, its dark body thrusting into the crimson blaze, slowly dissolving. "Who are you, and why do you wield the spiral flame?" A chilling voice emerged from the pulsating flames, rendering the scene exceedingly bizarre. The surrounding slave soldiers gradually regained their composure, yet faced with the peculiar fire, they were at a loss as to how to proceed. Mo Yuan relinquished the black gun, slashing his right hand across his left arm, a line of blood shooting forth, coalescing in midair into a long blade. With a swift motion, Mo Yuan infused his mental energy into the bloodied weapon. As the blood blade met the humanoid flame, a cacophony of crackles ensued, flames erupting, and an apparition staggered backward. "Infusing mental energy into blood? Intriguing, young one," the figure in red mused, seemingly unscathed. Summoning a similar blood blade into his grasp, he struck with his weapon, clashing against Mo Yuan's blade. In an instant, Mo Yuan felt a powerful mental force surge through the point of contact, striking directly at his mind, akin to an electric shock. His grip on the blade faltered, and as the opponent twisted his weapon, Mo Yuan's blood blade was sent flying. With a sweeping motion, the figure in red severed an arm from its body. Amid the roar of fury, the red-clad man received a fierce punch to the face. Despite his formidable spiritual power, his physical prowess was not exceptional. He was sent rolling away, a vulnerable tumble. "Lucian!" The crowd gasped in unison as the giant with the severed arm slowly collapsed to the ground. Though he had promptly pushed Mo Yuan away, he paid a grievous price. The gunshot wound on his body had yet to heal, and now he had lost an arm. He could no longer bear the burden of his injuries and collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. As Mo Yuan's frayed nerves began to settle, a chilling sensation enveloped his face. It was the blood of Lucien. The pungent scent of blood surged into his nostrils, and suddenly his heart was filled with a ravenous thirst for blood. Since his transformation into a vampire, he had endeavored to suppress his craving for blood, but at this moment it erupted uncontrollably. The energy of his vampiric lineage surged violently within him, and almost instinctively, Mo Yuan lunged towards the man in red, seizing him from the ground with fervor. With a swift motion, his fangs pierced the carotid artery of the man in red. The man weakly raised a hand in a futile attempt to stop Mo Yuan, but it seemed as if his energy had been entirely siphoned away, rendering him incapable of any action. He could only watch helplessly as Mo Yuan's eyes, now a deep ruby red, absorbed the life and blood flowing from him. Mo Yuan greedily drank the blood, which to him was the most exquisite delicacy. Most notably, the blood of this man in red carried a familiar energy, akin to the essence coursing through his own veins, the energy of the vampiric kin. "Who are you truly?" the man in red managed to ask, his voice strained. Without a response, Mo Yuan was lost in the ecstasy of the taste. "You fiend." The man in red resolved to make one final stand. His entire being ignited in a fierce blaze. Startled, Mo Yuan released his grip, attempting to retreat, only to realize he was ensnared by flames. "We shall perish together," the man in red shouted, but he soon sensed something amiss. The Mo Yuan engulfed in flames bore an expression of bewilderment, as if he had not sustained any harm. "How is this possible?" the figure clad in red bellowed, utterly devoid of composure. Recklessly, he extracted a circular object from his bosom and forcefully pressed it against Mo Yuan's chest. "Youngster, this is my spirit power pearl. You should feel honored to perish by its touch." As the object made contact with Mo Yuan, it emitted a blinding crimson light. Simultaneously, a similar scarlet glow emanated from the palm of Mo Yuan, as if the object had received a command. It began to hover over Mo Yuan's chest, gradually merging with him as the red-clad man burned with intensity, ultimately transforming into a crimson mark upon Mo Yuan's garment, emblazoned with the image of a mythical beast. The red-clad man fixed his gaze upon Mo Yuan's chest, disbelief etched across his features. "How can this be? It has been completely absorbed." Suddenly, he caught sight of the glow in Mo Yuan's palm, astonishment morphing into incredulity. You are the dragon god." Before he could ponder further, a fierce blaze engulfed him. Moments later, as the flames subsided, only a bewildered Mo Yuan remained. Upon seeing Lucian, Mo Yuan regained a modicum of clarity and shouted at his subordinate, "Who here knows first aid? Come quickly." The onlookers regarded him with a mix of surprise and hesitation, none daring to move. "What are you all dawdling for?" Crimey emerged, swiftly assisting Lucian in bandaging his wounds while exclaiming, "Ignorant fools. Can't you see the boss is a psychic? That wretch could only have killed him by draining his blood. Without the boss, you would have all been drained dry by him." Gradually, the crowd lowered their guard and began to clear the battlefield, with two individuals aiding Crimey and tending to Lucian's injuries. "Crimey, thank you." Mo Yuan gazed at the unconscious Lucian, murmuring, "Lucian, I owe you a life." Crimey interjected, "Boss, let us not speak in such a manner. Without you, we would have surely perished." That fellow's psychic energy was simply terrifying. "Psychic energy?" Mo Yuan pondered. "I have an unsettling feeling that my psychic energy may share a common origin with his. Perhaps he is also of the Urian lineage? Have you not encountered them?" A bittersweet smile crossed Mo Yuan's face, realizing that his noble identity from the Milda family was merely a ruse to deceive Crimey. Yet, he was perplexed as to why the crimson-clad man could wield bloodline energy. Why had his desperate strike borne no fruit? Before he could unravel these thoughts, the sound of gunfire erupted around them. The group turned to see figures emerging on the surrounding hills. The Milda forces had encircled them. Chapter 12, Humanity? Retreat into the cave. Mo Yuan bellowed. "Crimey, take someone to support Lucian." The slave soldiers withdrew into the cavern. Mo Yuan instructed them to collapse the cave entrance with explosives before advancing deeper within. As they ventured forth, astonishment grew among the group. The cave revealed a world of its own. Initially, the terrain appeared natural, but after descending for about 20 to 30 meters, signs of human excavation emerged on the rock walls. Eventually, the irregular cavern transformed into a well-structured underground passage. "Boss, if we proceed further down, we may run into an ambush. It is wise to consider the possibility of Sioux clan surveillance along this corridor," Crimey cautioned. Mo Yuan inquired, "Mori, can you establish communication with command?" Mori replied despondently, "It seems there is some sort of jamming device here. Our radio equipment is completely ineffective." Mo Yuan contemplated for a moment, realizing there were no other alternatives. Retreat was no longer an option. We could only brave the unknown ahead. "I shall lead the charge, while Crimey will safeguard the injured at the rear." Harnessing the energy of the bloodkin, Mo Yuan concentrated fully, cautiously advancing at the forefront with his arrow gun and blood knife in hand. Behind him, Taka, Mori, and Milu, each accompanied by several others. Formed small groups that advanced in a triangular formation, with Crimey bringing up the rear with the wounded. After enduring a series of fierce battles, the surviving slave soldiers had matured significantly, their cooperation becoming increasingly harmonious. They descended for over 2 hours without encountering the Sioux clan's forces. The passage was narrow, barely accommodating 3 individuals walking side by side. Although Mo Yuan exerted his psychic energy to the fullest, he felt no sense of being monitored. After traveling approximately 2 more miles, Mo Yuan ordered a halt. The slave soldiers pulled out their field rations to eat and drink. I have a feeling that this tunnel is unknown to the ordinary members of the Sioux clan, Mo Yuan whispered to Crimey. Among this group, only Crimey possessed formal military training, so he was the only one Mo Yuan could consult. But where will it lead? It cannot possibly be the command center of the Sioux clan. If that were the case, we would achieve great merit. I only hope we can return to the surface alive, sighed Mo Yuan. The past few days felt like a dream. He had been transported from Earth's orbit to tens of thousands of light years away, now finding himself deep within an alien underground. Should he perish here, it might take 1 billion years for anyone to discover his remains. Just then, Mori rushed over. Boss, I think I heard some movement on the other side of the wall. Really? Mo Yuan and Crimey listened intently, yet heard nothing. Mori remarked, we, the Plazans, are a subterranean people, endowed with exceptional hearing. Just adjacent to this passage lies a vast chamber, populated by numerous individuals. However, they seem to be rather inactive, as there is scarcely any sound of movement. Suddenly, Mo Yuan recalled that the energy of the Blood Clan could penetrate obstacles to a limited extent. He concentrated his mind and projected his spiritual energy. Although he was not well versed in the art of spiritual detection, having only practiced for a few hours in a cave, he felt a significant enhancement in his spiritual powers after consuming the blood of the crimson-clad individuals. After several tentative attempts, he succeeded in allowing his spiritual energy to penetrate the cave wall. A vague image materialized in his mind. The depiction from his spiritual detection was not as vivid as a camera's capture, but resembled a thermal imaging display, presenting a blurred outline of a figure. In Mo Yuan's consciousness, there were indeed several life forms on the other side, most of them lying down, with a few standing still, seemingly immobile for an extended period before eventually moving from one prone individual to another. Mo Yuan shared his findings, prompting contemplation among the others. All lying down. Could it be a barracks? Someone mused. It is night. Are the Sioux people already asleep? Taka proposed. That cannot be the case. What about those who are moving? Crimey countered, disagreeing with the notion. Mo Yuan pondered. Movement. The majority are lying down. Perhaps they are unable to move. Indeed, it must be a hospital. We are adjacent to the Sioux clan's field hospital. Mo Yuan glanced at the injured. Lucien had lost consciousness, and the others were severely wounded. He immediately said, Climby, gather the remaining explosives. We shall blast open the cave. Climby replied, Boss, the Sioux tribe will annihilate us the moment they notice. Mori added, Indeed, our assault on the hospital will surely attract their attention. Mo Yuan, growing anxious, exclaimed, If we fail to procure medical supplies, Lucien and the others will not survive much longer. Isn't it better than all of us perishing here? Shall we hold a vote? Climby suggested. Mo Yuan looked again at Lucien. The robust man's severed hand was bandaged, yet his pallor was alarming, breath shallow and labored. Even without medical knowledge, Mo Yuan understood that Lucien was nearing the end of his journey. Remembering how Lucien had shielded him from a blade, he declared resolutely, To hell with voting. I am the leader here, and you will all heed my command. These brothers have shielded us from bullets and blades. Who the hell is selfish enough to think of their own survival? Next time, I'll tie you up and use you as a human shield for the entire squad. The group had never witnessed Mo Yuan's fury to such an extent. They were all taken aback. Climby silently gathered the explosives, set them up, and then instructed everyone to retreat. He took aim and fired. A deafening explosion echoed as the cave wall was blasted open. Don't move. As the cave entrance yawned open, Mo Yuan led the charge inside. The others anxiously followed, and indeed, it was a hospital filled with patients lying on black beds, while doctors and nurses in white scrubs moved swiftly about. The sudden intrusion by Mo Yuan and his companions elicited a chorus of terrified screams from within. Mo Yuan had initially commanded that no shots be fired. However, an unfortunate incident occurred when Creamy accidentally discharged his weapon, unleashing a barrage of bullets. With a long, piercing scream, a figure clad in a white jumpsuit was riddled with bullets. Mo Yuan shot Creamy a fierce glare, but there was no time for reproach. He shouted, Everyone, remain still. Our injured require medical attention. If you refuse to cooperate, you shall meet the same fate as that poor soul. On the hospital beds, some individuals struggled to rise. Taka and his companions swiftly subdued them with a flurry of blows. Mo Yuan pointed at the newly assisted Lucian and the others, bellowing once more, "Hurry and save them." The medical staff appeared well-trained. Initially startled by the intrusion, they quickly regained their composure. A man, seemingly their leader, sneered. "Treating you executioners? Do not jest." Mo Yuan pressed his gun against the man's head, declaring, "I only know that my brothers require medical care." The man replied, "I am sorry. We are powerless to assist." Decisively, Mo Yuan thought. He gritted his teeth and stated, "I give you 1 minute. If you do not cooperate within that time, Taka, execute one patient every 30 seconds, starting from the nearest bed." The man resolutely responded, "We Sioux people only have warriors who stand and fight. We do not have cowards who kneel and beg for mercy. Even if you kill us all, it remains the same." With a heavy heart, Mo Yuan commanded, "Taka, proceed." Taka hesitated, showing reluctance to act. "Useless," Mo Yuan cursed, raising his bloody blade and striking down upon the figure lying on the sickbed. A prolonged, anguished scream erupted as he severed one of the man's ears. Unrelenting, he continued, slicing into the nose, mouth, and chest, each cut accompanied by a provocative glance towards his victim. From that moment forth, he earned the moniker the Savage Red Dragon, a title that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Much later, Lucian inquired if, at that time, he was truly driven by the bloodthirsty desires attributed to his kin by others. Mo Yuan pondered for a long while before responding, "What difference does it make? Whether one is bloodthirsty or not. War is never merciful. There is no distinction between cruel and merciful killing. At that moment, my sole intention was to exert every effort to save my brother. As for the methods, I care not for the opinions of those who come after." Everyone was left in stunned disbelief at Mo Yuan's madness. The man's hands and feet trembled, yet he uttered not a word. Was it not enough? Mo Yuan began the execution of the second man, this time slowing his movements tenfold, dragging the blade across the flesh, the cries tormenting the nerves of all who witnessed. Some doctors fainted, having dealt with the dead daily, yet they had never encountered such a harrowing scene. However, none yielded. "Dog bandit, if you have the guts, come kill me," shouted one injured man defiantly. "Very well," Mo Yuan replied curtly, rushing to lift him from the sickbed. "Boss, the Sioux clan believes that if a person bleeds out entirely after death, their soul will dissipate." Crimey suddenly interjected. Mo Yuan paused momentarily. Soon, he regained his composure and bitterly smiled to himself. If he were to rescue his brother, then what was it to transform into a demon? Without hesitation, he lifted the injured man and coldly addressed the medical staff, "Pay attention, do not blink." With a swift motion, he bit through the man's artery. The man could no longer endure the pain and collapsed to the ground, his teeth trembling in a disconcerting manner. "Release him, demon." A clear female voice shattered the oppressive atmosphere. Chapter 13. The irrevocable path. Mo Yuan suppressed the tumultuous nausea roiling within him and adopted the calmest tone he could muster. At last, someone has stepped forward. A woman clad in a jumpsuit strode forth, snatching the injured man from Mo Yuan's grasp and placing him onto a hospital bed. She staunched the man's bleeding, then took Lucian from Crimey and gently laid him on an empty bed, beginning to utilize the medical instruments positioned nearby for his treatment. Mo Yuan fixed her with a cold stare, ready to intervene should she act detrimentally towards Lucian. The man, now catching his breath, shouted at the woman, "No, Yar. Do not assist these butchers." The woman, referred to as Yar, did not respond. After administering an injection to Lucian, she proceeded to treat several other injured slave soldiers. The man admonished sternly, "This is treason. Cease at once." In a sudden surge of anger, Mo Yuan advanced and seized the man by the throat. "Do not harm my brother?" Yer screamed. Momentarily taken aback, Mo Yuan released his grip, then, in a flash, delivered a punch that rendered the man unconscious. "Devil, you shall meet a grim fate." Yer glared at Mo Yuan with a venomous gaze, a look so intense that even Mo Yuan, who had faced death multiple times, felt a momentary dizziness. He forced himself to maintain composure and retorted, "Focus on your duties and refrain from meddling in others' affairs." Internally, he was besieged by waves of agitation and unrest. The others in the hall appeared to be paralyzed with fear, rendered speechless by Mo Yuan's ruthless methods. Scarcely daring to breathe, only Creamy seemed to be contemplating something, his eyes darting with thought. The injured slave soldiers had been tended to. Yar turned to Mo Yuan and declared, "Your men are no longer in peril. Please, Take them and leave, devil. Just as Mo Yuan was about to respond, an unforeseen calamity struck. A violent explosion erupted from the ceiling of the hospital, the powerful shockwave throwing everyone to the ground. Amidst the billowing smoke, several figures descended from above. The Su clan has discovered us. Mo Yuan sprang to his feet, wielding his bloodied blade with astonishing speed, dispatching 2 Su clan special forces members before they could react. Creamy hurled a smoke grenade, temporarily staving off the Su clan's further intrusion. In the chaos, Mo Yuan shouted, "Quickly, gather the wounded and retreat." He reached for Lucian's bed, seizing the individual and darting back towards the original underground passage. Just as they exited the underground hospital, a grenade was thrown from above, and a colossal explosion buried the entire facility in rubble. Several slave soldiers, slow to retreat, were ensnared by the collapsing walls. Their fate sealed. "Brother! Brother!" The person in Mo Yuan's arms screamed with heart-wrenching desperation. What? It was only then that Mo Yuan realized the individual he held was small and delicate, unmistakably not the towering Lucian. As the smoke dissipated, he took a moment to survey his surroundings. In his arms lay a figure clad in a pristine white jumpsuit, the mask having been obliterated by the force of the explosion. A delicate visage, reminiscent of a rain-kissed pear blossom, emerged before him. It was Yar, the renowned doctor of the Su tribe. Stunned as if struck by lightning, Mo Yuan's heart fell into a stupor. "Lucian, where are you?" he finally cried out. A pair of strong hands gently patted his back, and Lucian's steady voice resonated from behind him. "It's all right, thank you." It turned out that when the explosion occurred, Dr. Yar had been knocked down onto the hospital bed by the shockwave, while Lucian, who had been lying there, had tumbled to the floor. Naturally, Lucian possessed the finest physical prowess among them. Following his treatment, he had regained a measure of mobility and, in a flurry of motion, rolled and crawled out. Unexpectedly, Yar found herself rescued by Mo Yuan. "Brother!" Yar cried out in sorrow, unable to bear the overwhelming grief, and she fainted. Mo Yuan awkwardly cradled her. Realizing that this underground dweller of the Su tribe seemed unaware that placing her here was akin to condemning her to death. Yet, the fates of his own comrades remained uncertain as well. After some contemplation, he chose to hold her close, rallying the group to prepare for departure. After all, she had saved Lucian. Until his own life flickered out, he ought to exert every effort to safeguard her. Perhaps such thoughts seemed foolish. Just moments ago, he had ruthlessly slaughtered the enemy's wounded, and now he found himself compelled to protect one of them. Yet, Mo Yuan mused, "For me, living must adhere to principles. Regardless of the means employed, principles must never be forsaken. What did Father say? You are a steadfast individual. This perseverance may bring you suffering, yet it may also bestow upon you happiness. Regardless of the circumstances, those who saved my life and my brother's life should not perish before me. To rescue them, any means are justifiable." Following the explosion at the hospital, only 15 soldiers remained alive, with the exception of Mo Yuan and Crimey, who were both injured. Mo Yuan sighed and led the way down towards the underground passage. There was no need to flee. This place would be your grave. To his astonishment, upon turning a corner and entering a spacious cavern, Mo Yuan and his companions found themselves suddenly surrounded. The individuals before them were well-equipped, clad in heavy-duty combat suits, and wielding high-energy particle guns. With a dozen of such figures aiming their weapons at vital points around him, Mo Yuan could not conceive any means of escape. Soon, Crimey and the others were disarmed. Mo Yuan also relinquished his firearm, yet he held onto it airtightly with one hand. These individuals were evidently not ordinary Su troops. As if to confirm his suspicions, a middle-aged man approached leisurely, dressed in impeccably tailored civilian attire that remained spotless even in the underground cavern. His calm demeanor indicated an extraordinary status. "How did you come to know of this secret passage?" the middle-aged man inquired, emanating an invisible pressure. Mo Yuan's mind raced. To capture the leader would be the only opportunity. However, the guns surrounding him posed a significant threat. Perhaps he could use your air as a shield? This sudden thought startled Mo Yuan. "No, I must not violate my principles. Yet without such action, we would all meet our demise." The sole opportunity for survival and his own principles clashed within him. As Mo Yuan was drenched in sweat. This internal struggle was far more intense than facing the muzzles of the Su clan or the psychic assaults of the red-clad figures. The middle-aged man observed the slight tremor of the youth before him and could not help but chuckle. "Young man, at this stage, are you still clinging to illusions of beauty? Just disclose how you found this place, and I assure you, your demise will be devoid of agony." With a predatory glint in his eyes, he scrutinized Mo Yuan, only to suddenly catch sight of the crimson emblem upon his chest, exclaiming, "Your Excellency, the envoy." Chapter 14. The turning point of war. In an instant, the middle-aged man donned a sycophantic demeanor, commanding his subordinates to lower their weapons while eagerly proclaiming, "Your Excellency must be an outstanding figure of the third generation, shouldering such a substantial mission at such a tender age, to evade the scrutiny of those Murdarians. You even devised a means to disguise yourself as a slave soldier, truly a genius of unparalleled caliber." It appeared that this red beast was a unique insignia of status. Yet Mo Yuan pondered the true significance of the red-clad individuals, uncertain of the middle-aged man's identity and his connection to the red figures. Mo Yuan feared that speaking might reveal too much, thus he opted to remain observant. The middle-aged man, unfazed, continued, "Please, Your Excellency, follow me." He led the way through a passage, navigating several twists and turns, until they entered a vast chamber. This was a command center, with holographic images of various planetary locations displayed upon the surrounding walls, reflecting the real-time state of the conflict. However, what astonished Mo Yuan was the absence of the expected staff. The room contained only the middle-aged man and his entourage. The middle-aged man gestured towards Yar, addressing Mo Yuan, "My lord, I am aware that your guards are mindless assassins, yet this woman." Mo Yuan interjected hastily. Her mind has also been taken from her. In this precarious situation, Mo Yuan felt uneasy about abandoning her and resorted to weaving a falsehood in response to the middle-aged man's words. A look of confusion crossed the middle-aged man's face. Mo Yuan's heart raced, yet he maintained an air of composure, adopting a tone of authoritative reprimand. "What, are you harboring doubts?" After a moment's hesitation, the middle-aged man pressed on, "Your accent seems." Mo Yuan inwardly cursed his misfortune. He recognized the distinctive eloquence in the words of the red-cloaked individual. Having originated from a humble background on Earth and subsequently treated as a slave in the cosmos, he felt a profound disparity in bearing. At that moment, Yar, the Sulu doctor, stirred awake in his arms, rubbed her eyes, and upon seeing the middle-aged man, exclaimed, "Governor." Mo Yuan was taken aback. Had the Sulu governor colluded with the Maraudans? Why then would they incite rebellion? Was this governor akin to a traitor like Wang Jingwei? The Sulu governor pointed at Yar, questioning, "Special envoy, what is the meaning of this?" His tone was laced with palpable suspicion. With his identity on the verge of revelation, Mo Yuan braced himself for a desperate struggle. Channeling the energy of his bloodkin, he prepared to strike first, ready to subdue the Sulu governor at a moment's notice. Suddenly, Creamy interjected, "Your Excellency, my brother is known as the libertine of the Sapi family. He possesses charm and elegance, albeit lacking in the decorum befitting nobility. As for this woman, I hope you will not take too much offense at her being destined to become my brother's consort." The imperial nobleman's eyes flickered as he adopted a demeanor of humility and deference. "Ah, I see. Please forgive my indiscretion." Mo Yuan silently exhaled in relief. Though Creamy was somewhat cowardly, he was undeniably astute, often relying on his cunning to navigate perilous situations unscathed. Yar stared blankly at the official, seemingly bewildered by the unfolding events. Perhaps she comprehended the reality, yet dared not believe it. The official cleared his throat and gestured towards a holographic map. "Esteemed envoy, the military situation is urgent. Allow me to report the latest developments. With your generous support, our forces have gained the capability to contend with the regular army of Milda within the atmosphere. After 2 months of siege, the Rusta fortress is on the brink of capitulation, with the remaining defenders confined to an area of less than 10 square miles in the southern section of the fortress. General Gomes, the governor of Milda's western province, has organized 3 rescue operations. The first 2 airborne assaults by the slave legions were swiftly repelled by us. Just now, the regular army of Milda has directly deployed a legion above the fortress, strengthening their resistance. To annihilate this contingent of the enemy, I have ordered the reserves to mobilize and brought all artillery into position. I estimate that by tomorrow night, we shall completely eradicate this batch of Mildans." At this juncture, the governor scoffed disdainfully, remarking on the incompetence of Gomes, the provincial governor, in military affairs. The aerial firepower at the onset of battle was chaotic, and the paratroopers descended haphazardly, failing to consolidate their forces. Now, he carelessly cast an entire legion into the encirclement, though numerous. How long could they withstand the onslaught of our troops from all sides? Crimey could not help but curse, lamenting that Gomes, with age, had only grown more muddled, questioning whether the imperial soldiers were merely fodder for his folly. It was only after speaking that he remembered his current position as an adversary to Gomes within the empire. which rendered him momentarily embarrassed into silence. Mo Yuan, however, sensed an unsettling dissonance. His intuition suggested that the actions of the Murdans were far from straightforward. He casually inquired, "Your Excellency, do you assert that you possess the capability to contend with the Murdans within the atmosphere?" "Indeed," the governor declared with pride. "Our aircraft are aerodynamically superior for combat on this planet. In terms of artillery, whether high-energy laser cannons or multifaceted particle arrays, we are not at a disadvantage compared to the Murdans. As for our armored divisions, thanks to your substantial support, we have successfully replicated the Ravager-class main battle tank and have formed 3 armored regiments. Coupled with our omnipresent underground fortifications, it can be said that even if the Murdans were to deploy 1,000,000 troops, they would find no advantage. And what of the Murdan space fleets?" Mo Yuan pressed further. The governor responded with a hint of frustration. The construction of a space fleet is no task to be accomplished overnight. However, we have long established a comprehensive network of underground fortifications. Their warships are unable to land, so there is no need for your excellency to worry. Like a thunderclap on a clear day, a sudden clarity dawned upon Mo Yuan. The underground fortifications. Your greatest reliance lies in the underground works. Indeed, our underground fortifications are the result of generations of effort, and they represent our greatest support in this uprising, interjected the governor. What do you think? Mo Yuan glanced at Crimey. The underground fortifications? Yes, indeed. The tunnels here are rather intricate. We have meandered through them. Wait, are you suggesting? Could that possibly be true? Does that old fellow have such ruthlessness? My heavens, that would mean the loss of over 100,000 lives. Crimey exclaimed after a moment of contemplation. The governor, perplexed, inquired, "What are you two contemplating?" Just then, the holographic battlefield shifted once more. The artillery of the Sioux clan unleashed a fierce bombardment, tearing the earth asunder, flattening mountains, and filling valleys, leaving the fortress in ruins. The Sioux clan's aircraft, despite suffering heavy losses, gradually gained air superiority through intense combat. Waves of fighter planes rained down fiery death upon the surviving defenders within the fortress. Following a formidable display of firepower, elite infantry from armored vehicles surged forth from the tunnel entrances, launching a final assault on the stronghold. Excellent. It seems we won't even need to wait until tomorrow. These Mildeans will soon crumble, declared the governor. No, if I am not mistaken, your doom is imminent. Mo Yuan replied coldly. Chapter 15. The aura of great generals. The consul, taken aback, exclaimed, "Your Excellency, I do not comprehend." No sooner had he spoken than the battle control system blared an urgent alarm. Warning, a significant energy disturbance detected. Enemy warships are deploying numerous aircraft. It is anticipated that the enemy fleet will breach the atmosphere in 5 minutes. Enemy battleship main guns firing. At this pivotal moment, September 2nd, year 1283 of the 23rd Galactic Era. At precisely 1908:03, the fleet directly under the jurisdiction of the western province of Milda unleashed a simultaneous orbital bombardment upon the northern continent of Timi 3. The formidable high-energy array cannons claimed the lives of over 200,000 soldiers from both sides in the initial volley. Simultaneously obliterated were the entirety of the Sioux tribe's aircraft, armored units, and artillery. Following 3 rounds of concentrated fire, a swarm of heavy bombers dispersed their joint assault munitions across every inch of the continent. The fortress of Rustad received particular attention, with the colossal stronghold and the surrounding lands vaporized in an instant. After 2 hours of relentless bombardment, 3 legions of the Milda army, accompanied by substantial auxiliary forces, descended upon the searing planetary surface. Their assault was direct and potent, as nearly every subterranean city of the Sioux tribe found itself beneath the onslaught of Milda landing vessels. Massive engineering teams promptly detonated the entrances to the tunnels, while elite infantry clad in heavy-powered combat suits surged forth. A massacre unfolded within each city. The Milda soldiers unleashed their fury through their weapons, annihilating the magnificent underground cities, leaving the planet scarred with gaping craters and ravaged tunnels. The entire planet resembles a colossal rotten apple, lamenting its misfortunes to the passers-by. According to subsequent statistics, after a month-long cleansing operation, fewer than 10 million of the 200 million Sioux people survived. The star Timi 3, the jewel of the western provinces, has once again returned under the esteemed governance of the Milda Council and the sacred rule of the king. I find it difficult to fathom that the old curmudgeon, Gomes, possesses such intricate calculations. Gazing at the charred surface of the planet displayed in the hologram, Crimey sighed. I have a feeling this man is not Gomes. Mo Yuan remarked. He has encountered Gomes before. It was merely Gomez's whimsical fancy that transformed Mo Yuan from a biological experiment into the current enslaved soldier. From my recollection of that time, Gomez appeared to be a straightforward soldier, making it hard to imagine he would orchestrate such elaborate schemes. Since the first expedition several months ago, the traps had already been set. The Rustad fortress acted like a poison confection, drawing the attention of the Sioux people. The protracted struggle gradually sapped the strength of the defending forces, leading the Sioux to the illusion that a little more effort would secure their triumph over the Milda invaders. The ineffectiveness of the reinforcements greatly boosted the morale of the Sioux people. In reality, the seemingly chaotic airdrop had a singular objective: to probe the location of the Sioux underground cities. From the timing of the airborne troops' encounters with the enemy and the scale of their forces, the Milda commanders deduced the distribution of the Sioux underground cities and barracks. Ultimately, an entire Milda legion descended onto the fortress, serving as a silent reminder to the Sioux commanders: unveil your trump cards, for the moment you deploy all your forces, victory shall be yours. Using the lives of hundreds of thousands as bait, they coaxed the Sioux tribe into relinquishing their underground network, exposing their entire forces to the cannon's maw of the Milda warships. Such meticulous calculations, a heartless demeanor, intricately woven plans, and flawless execution. A military academy professor would undoubtedly bestow a perfect score upon such a student. The lives of over 1 billion on Timmy 3 serve as the bedrock for this commander's legacy. Is this the demeanor of a great general? Mo Yuan felt an indescribable sensation, sensing that this commander would stir new storms within the galaxy. In the years to come, his name would echo throughout the cosmos, intertwined with countless deaths and carnage. As he contemplated this, he was uncertain whether it was the thirst for blood that ignited him or the confrontation with a formidable enemy that stirred his combat fervor. A powerful exhilaration surged within him, fueling his desire to escape the fate of being a mere pawn. He yearned for the day when he could engage as an equal with this commander, a player in the grand game, while he remained but a slave in the present. Your Excellency, I believe it is time for us to depart, he stated. Surprisingly, in the face of the impending slaughter of his compatriots, the governor exhibited little sorrow. He guided Mo Yuan and the others swiftly into a narrow passage. Among the group, only Yair appeared dazed, relying on Mo Yuan for support. This is a Milda fighter, exclaimed Crimey. At the end of the passage lay a vast hangar, where a grain mill transport ship was encircled by 4 Krosos fighters at its core. For Sioux pilots, upon encountering the governor and his entourage, bowed in unison, placing their right palms flat against their chests, executing a standard military salute. The governor smiled and said, "Please, esteemed envoy, take the helm of this transport aircraft, so we may witness your prowess soaring through the cosmos." Uncertain how to decline, Mo Yuan, the pretender envoy, lacked the ability to pilot any spacecraft. At this critical moment, it was Creamy who intervened. "Allow me and my brother to fly together, Your Excellency." Without waiting for a response, she pulled Mo Yuan into the cockpit. Above the cockpit hung 2 flight suits, which Creamy adeptly donned, assisting Mo Yuan into his as well. "Once inside, I shall handle the controls." Creamy's voice resonated through the headset. The flight suit was a full-body garment, enveloping them tightly, making movement cumbersome. Mo Yuan pondered the reason behind such a design. Upon opening the cockpit, he was astonished to find it filled with a brown liquid. Although odorless, it evoked a peculiar sensation. Creamy guided him into the cockpit, and they were instantly enveloped by this viscous substance. Mo Yuan noted its unusual thickness and felt a slight tingling sensation in his head, having been an experimental subject. He recognized this as a sign of electronic devices interfacing with the brain. Indeed, after a brief moment, a star map materialized before his eyes, revealing that the helmet of the flight suit possessed virtual display capabilities. Focusing intently, all combat directives were poised to be received by the integrated combat system aboard the aircraft. The voice of Crimey resonated. "I will assume the role of the primary pilot. You need only focus on the operational steps displayed on your helmet. The act of flying is quite simple. By integrating with the aircraft, the combat system will provide you with optimal assistance." Mo Yuan gazed ahead, observing on his helmet the completion of all personnel boarding the vessel. "Shall we take off?" Crimey's spirit wavered slightly, and the aircraft experienced a gentle tremor. The helmet indicated the successful ignition of the antimatter engine, and the hangar doors slowly opened, allowing 5 aircraft to exit in succession. Chapter 16, The Death Dance of Klosos, Part 1. Thus, within the neural buffering solution, you can perceive my spiritual fluctuations to a limited extent. Given your capabilities as a psychic, this should be rather effortless for you. Crimey instructed Mo Yuan while deftly maneuvering the aircraft. Mo Yuan glanced at the preset navigation map within the system, the fleet emerged from the underground passage, the exit located on the southern continent. The fleet initially navigated in reverse, utilizing the cover of Timmy 4 to make a circuitous route, subsequently masquerading as the returning Milda army to rendezvous with the interstellar cruiser Suppression. It appeared that the traders within Milda were aboard the Suppression. Only upon entering space did Mo Yuan discover another function of the neural buffering solution. During the ascent beyond the atmosphere, the engines required secondary ignition to adjust the flight speed to meet the demands of cosmic travel. At this juncture, the pilot would endure considerable gravitational forces. The buffering solution greatly alleviated the physical strain. Mo Yuan could not help but recall the airborne operation from a day prior, when, upon breaching the atmosphere, everyone felt an overwhelming urge to vomit. He pondered how the regular army of Milda managed to address this predicament. The journey proceeded relatively smoothly. The Timmy 4 star is situated 2 astronomical units away from Timmy 3, with 1 astronomical unit approximately equating to 300 million kilometers. At their current velocity, it took Mo Yuan roughly half an hour to traverse this distance. During this interval, he initially familiarized himself with the operation of the spacecraft. It must be noted that the most crucial aspect of piloting a cosmic fighter is mental fortitude, encompassing both the speed of neural reflexes and the capacity to endure stress. For a psionic individual like Mo Yuan, there exists an inherent advantage in piloting such craft. Boss, for the nobility, piloting skills are fundamental abilities. I truly fail to comprehend how your amnesia could be so complete that you would forget even this, complained Crimey. I have already mentioned that I am from Earth. Yet you refuse to believe it, Mo Yuan chuckled inwardly. Those wretched beings had somehow acquired the Imperial Navy's aircraft. Once I return, I shall unearth that traitor. Perhaps I could regain my freedom at once. Crimey continued, Boss, do you think that traitor might be that scoundrel, Gomes? Perhaps that fellow orchestrated this entire betrayal to establish his own reputation, playing the solo act from start to finish. Mo Yuan pondered, I doubt it. The Sioux faction's governor holds Gomes in utter contempt, mocking his lack of military acumen. I do not believe he is the one. Furthermore, we are currently heading towards the Suppressor, not Gomez's flagship, the counterattack battleship. It is more plausible that the traitor lies elsewhere. That makes sense, Crimey replied. Oh, what is that? A small dot of light appeared on the radar, trailing closely behind them. The speed of this dot was astonishing, initially. They were separated by 1,000,000 miles, yet within mere seconds, the distance had diminished to 100,000 miles. It was a Crosos fighter jet. But given its astonishing speed, could the pilot maintain control? The combat system identified the opponent's identity, astonished by the swiftness of the adversary. Crimey explained, speed is not an issue for the propulsion system. The antimatter engine allows the aircraft to sustain velocities of several hundred interstellar units per hour. However, the critical factor is that high-speed flight demands an exceptional synergy between man and machine, as the nervous system of an ordinary pilot may suffer under such conditions. Those with psychic abilities possess mental faculties far surpassing the average individual, thus the most distinguished pilots are typically psychics. The 4 escorting fighter jets also sensed the situation. The lead aircraft, designated as number 1, reported to the governor, Your Excellency, a Milda fighter jet is rapidly approaching our position, requesting instructions for action. The governor pondered. The opponent may not have discerned our true identity. Nevertheless, to err on the side of caution, let us temporarily enter the atmosphere of Timmy 4. If it indeed poses a threat to us, we shall discreetly eliminate it on Timmy 4. What does Your Excellency think? Naturally, Mo Yuan held no objections. Consequently, the aircraft collectively initiated a deceleration, shutting down their secondary engines and entering the orbit of Timmy 4. The pursuing fighter jet followed suit, plunging into the atmosphere of Timmy 4 while simultaneously transmitting an identification communication. The governor informed Mo Yuan via the communicator, Your Excellency, we can no longer refrain from taking action. We possess only the code for communication with the Suppression and are unable to obtain the Milda Army's identification code. In a short while, the escort fighters will take charge of neutralizing this adversary, while you will maneuver the transport aircraft to breach the atmosphere, ensuring an initial rendezvous with the Suppression. Upon receiving the directive, the escort fighters adjusted their course, confronting the rapidly approaching Milda fighter jets. Both aircraft ascended swiftly, obstructing each other's ascent route to prevent an escape into space, executing a coordinated flanking maneuver from both sides. Given the overwhelming ratio of forces at 4-1, the lead pilot exuded confidence in securing victory. Under his command, the second aircraft activated its fire control radar to lock onto the target, while he deactivated the detection systems, propelling forward at high speed toward the opponent. Crimey elucidated to Mo Yuan that during combat within the atmosphere, limitations imposed by gravitational forces and terrain restrict aircraft speed. Typically, an aircraft with its detector activated would be spotted by the enemy at around 500 miles, whereas one with its detector deactivated would only be detected at approximately 100 miles. With our forces significantly superior, the lead aircraft opted to shut down its detector, relying on the second aircraft to relay operational data through the data link. This strategy would enable the lead aircraft to approach the enemy covertly and launch a surprise attack at close range. As for the third and fourth aircraft, they would occupy elevated positions, preventing the adversary from fleeing into outer space. As the conversation unfolded, the lead aircraft had already reached a position 200 kilometers from the Nebula fighters. The enemy executed an arc maneuver, making synchronization challenging. I intended to employ a strike. The communication system transmitted the lead pilot's psychic information. What is synchronization? Mo Yuan pondered within his mind. Laser cannons or high-energy particle beams can instantaneously rend a fighter jet asunder. However, accurately targeting a high-speed aircraft presents a formidable challenge. Synchronization involves adjusting one's speed to match that of the opponent, aligning trajectories so that both aircraft appear relatively stationary to one another, thus allowing the laser cannon to strike true. Experienced pilots eschew straight-line flight, making it exceedingly difficult for an adversary to synchronize their movements in the event of a surprise attack. It seems the pursuer is no novice, Crimey remarked. At this juncture, the second aircraft had relayed the analyzed flight trajectory data to the first. With a slight tremor of its wings, the first aircraft's launch platform unfurled, and two short-range Queen Bee missiles were propelled forth with electric precision. The Nebula fighter appeared blissfully unaware, continuing its rapid approach towards the transport aircraft housing Mo Yuan and his team. This fellow is doomed, Crimey declared, gazing at the radar. What? In the moment of Crimey's exclamation, just as the missiles neared, the Nebula fighter abruptly plummeted straight toward the ground. The two missiles zipped past it. The engine had stalled mid-air. At this point, the combat zone was a mere 10,000 meters above the ground, a height that felt akin to skimming the surface for a cosmic warplane. After stalling, the Nebula fighter descended several thousand meters in just a second or two. But soon it arced gracefully, climbing rapidly towards the flank of the second aircraft. Can the pilot withstand such a swift restart? Crimey murmured. Meanwhile, the first aircraft had been left behind. It activated its detector, executed a dive, leveled their altitudes, and then launched two Annihilation antimatter tracking missiles into the fray. The front-facing No. 2 machine hastily launched two female bees. This time, the Nebula aircraft found itself in peril as antimatter tracking missiles were fired from behind, homing in on the engines. Should it come to a halt in mid-air, the short-range missiles from the front would be unavoidable. The Sioux clan had evidently trained their forces well. Crimey maneuvered the Nebula aircraft, suddenly accelerating towards the oncoming female bees. At the critical moment before impact, it executed a sharp 90-degree climb, transitioning from horizontal to vertical, while the Annihilation reaction trailing behind could not respond in time, resulting in a direct collision with the female bee. Enveloped in the blaze of the explosion, the Nebula aircraft pressed on without hesitation, ultimately positioning itself above Graymeer just before Morien and the other's transport craft exited the atmosphere. Chapter 17, The Dance of Death of Crosos, Part 2. Crimey deftly maneuvered the aircraft around, attempting to evade the Nebula aircraft by veering to the side of Graymeer's fuselage. Observing the unfavorable turn of events, the No. 3 and No. 4 machines each launched a Blue Monster fish long-range guided missile. The roles of the No. 1 and No. 2 machines transformed into that of a data control platform, while the No. 3 and No. 4 machines executed a linear maneuver towards the Nebula aircraft after their launch. The Blue Monster fish long-range guided missile boasts a maximum range of up to 1,000 kilometers and can be remotely controlled by the aircraft to alter its flight trajectory, making it a formidable tool for long-range pursuits. However, throughout its flight, it requires continuous data correction from the mother ship, rendering the latter incapable of undertaking other tasks. In this aerial combat, the Sioux faction held an overwhelming advantage in forces, deploying two aircraft specifically as control platforms to guide missiles, while the mother ship refrained from directing tasks post-launch, instead leveraging its altitude to dive directly at the opponent. The Nebula fighter remained oblivious to the rapidly approaching Blue Monster fish, fixating instead on the gray meal, which, under the pressure, compelled the Crimey to continually lower its altitude and, consequently, its speed. This pilot is either on stimulants or completely deranged, Crimy exclaimed vehemently. Within mere seconds, two blue monster fish, under guidance, had already closed in on the Milda fighter. Suddenly, the Milda aircraft executed a high-speed rotation around its axis, spinning several times per second, pushing the limits of both its airframe and engine capabilities. The rapid spinning generated intense turbulence in the airflow surrounding the aircraft, causing the missiles to spiral along with it. In an instant, the plane leveled out, bursting forth from the turbulent zone, while the blue monster fish collided, disintegrating into a cloud of debris. Am I witnessing aerial acrobatics? Mo Yuan gasped in astonishment. This is a super ace pilot. Crimy sighed. Such rapid rotations and intricate maneuvers, typically referred to as supermaneuverability, would usually leave an ordinary person disoriented, and even seasoned pilots would temporarily lose control after executing such complex movements. To accomplish this series of actions while maintaining combat capability would earn immense pride in any nation's air force. For the first time, he found himself doubting the outcome of this aerial battle. The 4 Sioux fighter jets were evidently affected, although they engaged at high speed. There was an impression that they had become rather cautious. As the aircraft soared over, it executed an intricate maneuver, causing turbulent air currents that forced to plunge to an altitude of 2,000 meters, its speed dwindling to a snail's pace of 1,000 kilometers per hour. This fellow's body must surely be forged from titanium crystal, lamented. Observing that had temporarily lost the ability to breach the atmosphere, the jet pulled its nose up, performing an elegant half-turn in the air, and faced the pursuing Sioux aircraft head-on. I sensed something amiss. That jet is clearly oriented towards the Sioux fighters, yet the distance between them remains unchanged, remarked, noting that the radar showed no variation in separation. Indeed, let me check. It is flying in reverse. Although the 4 antimatter engines granted the capability for omnidirectional flight, what purpose does this backward flying serve, aside from burdening the pilot? Pondered, equally perplexed. The answer soon emerged as the combat control system of the first fighter issued a warning. Caution, synchronization achieved, synchronization rate 99.8, laser energy detected. Then, a blinding flash illuminated the sky as the first fighter disintegrated midair. The pilot of the aircraft had completed the synchronization while inverted and in reverse flight. Were it not for the adversarial context, would have applauded the skill of the pilot, even in the face of relentless pursuit. Crimy felt an overwhelming sense of pride for his homeland's possession of such remarkable pilots. Only the invincible Milda army could cultivate such extraordinary talents. He was the tempest that reigned supreme across the galaxy. As the 3 remaining Sioux aircraft witnessed the destruction of their number 1 unit by the enemy's laser cannon, they immediately executed an arc maneuver. However, this maneuver adversely affected their speed. The Milda fighter jet executed a swift roll, launching 2 Queen Bees towards the adversary. The second unit performed a graceful roll while deploying decoy missiles, causing both Queen Bees to miss their target entirely. These Sioux pilots were no slouches either. Crimy observed on the radar. No, their launch of the Queen Bees was not intended to strike the opponent, Mo Yuan suddenly realized. Indeed, at the very moment the second unit completed its roll, the Milda fighter jet synchronized with its opponent, unleashing a barrage from its laser cannons. The second unit met the same fate as the first, reduced to a heap of scrap metal. In aerial combat, it is crucial to disrupt the opponent's flight rhythm, compelling them to act and to deliver a decisive blow at the most opportune moment, Mo Yuan pondered. The remaining 2 aircraft unleashed a frenzied barrage, and within moments, 8 missiles of various types were simultaneously launched towards the Milda fighter jet. An anxious voice crackled over the communicator. My lord, we will hold him off with all our might. You must accelerate and climb rapidly to break through the atmosphere. Crimy understood this was their final opportunity. Gritting his teeth, he raised the nose of the Greymere, engaging all 4 engines to their full capacity as they surged towards the vastness of space. The Milda fighter jet, akin to an exquisite dancer, gracefully leads its 8 accompanying partners through the sky, their elegant movements tracing intricate paths that paint a vibrant tapestry across the firmament. Alas, Crimy stared at the radar, distressed as he reduced speed. Calculations indicated that any further acceleration would result in a direct collision with 2 annihilation antimatter tracking missiles. Unexpectedly, due to the deft maneuvers of the Milda fighter, their own forces were inadvertently jeopardized. Crimy regained altitude at 20,000 meters, while the 2 supporting Sioux-type fighters, having launched their long-range attacks, were compelled to accelerate in a desperate attempt to enter close-range engagement. The Milda fighter unleashed a blue creature towards the 3rd aircraft, tracking Crimy while simultaneously guiding the blue projectile. The fourth aircraft unleashed a barrage of laser fire, yet, regrettably, the lack of synchronization rendered the laser cannons ineffective against the Milda fighter. The third aircraft commenced evasive maneuvers, releasing decoy missiles. However, two female bees were perfectly timed to intercept its escape route, leaving it no choice but to accept its imminent demise. Observing that the distance had dwindled to 200 kilometers, the remaining fourth aircraft prepared for a final assault, launching all four remaining female bees in a single surge, approaching the Milda fighter in an arc while unleashing a furious volley of laser fire. Amidst the cacophony of gunfire, the Milda fighter once again hovered momentarily, executing a stunning aerial flip during its rapid descent, and unleashed annihilation in a head-down, feet-up position. The antimatter tracking missile possesses the remarkable capability to autonomously pursue the flames emitted from the antimatter engine's nozzle. Thus, it is most advantageous to launch such missiles at the rear and underside of an adversary's aircraft, as these are typically the locations where fighter engines are installed. The aerial halt and subsequent maneuver of the Milda fighter conveniently positioned it in an optimal launching stance. The Sioux fighters, unprepared for this tactic, found themselves unexpectedly above their opponent during high-speed flight. In a thunderous cacophony, the last Sioux fighter was reduced to mere dust. With this accomplished, the Milda fighter ascended its nose, swiftly reclaiming a favorable position ahead of Creamy. It was over. Witnessing the spectacular display of the opposition, Creamy felt no semblance of escape was possible. Chapter 18, The Death Dance of Croesus, Part 2. The control of the main system had shifted. The soft voice of the computer startled Mo Yuan. Why was Creamy no longer at the helm? Creamy, respond quickly. For heaven's sake, has he fainted? Turning around, he saw Creamy had indeed succumbed again, leaving the fate of this transport aircraft and all aboard in Mo Yuan's hands. This fellow always faltered at crucial moments. With a muttered curse, Mo Yuan managed to guide the Greymere to evade the Milda fighter. Recalling Creamy's instructions, he adjusted the aircraft's pitch, preparing to accelerate and break through the atmosphere. The Milda fighter traced a graceful arc in the air, closely shadowing the Greymere from above, compelling Mo Yuan to once again lower the nose in search of a breakthrough opportunity at low altitude. At this juncture, the separation between the two aircraft was less than 10 meters. Viewed from the ground, the diminutive fighter nestled against the robust transport plane, creating a rare spectacle of side-by-side flight, akin to newlyweds entwined in affection. Who would surmise that these two crafts were engaged in a life-or-death struggle? The high-speed proximity of the two machines generated air currents potent enough to reduce them to heaps of scrap metal with the slightest misstep. Yet, Morian, a novice to the realm of flight, had thus far averted disaster solely due to the masterful skill of the Milda fighter pilot. The pilot consistently managed to marginally increase the distance just before the Greymere spiraled out of control, and whenever the Greymere showed signs of ascending, the pilot would interpose their aircraft, obstructing the opponent's path and forcing them back into the lower atmosphere. It seemed the pilot had no intention of shooting us down. Why? Was the intention to capture prisoners? The Sioux tribe's magistrate was indeed a valuable asset. However, were he to force us to land, we, the enslaved, would undoubtedly be executed by the arriving Milda forces. The only recourse was to break through the atmosphere and rendezvous with the suppression, ceaselessly circling at low altitude. With no opportunity presenting itself, coupled with the ever-present threat of death, Morian's mental state was stretched to its limit. The Milda fighter was like a perilous dance partner, tightening the shackles with each graceful measure. In the course of one's life, one often encounters various crises, hardships, and perilous situations. If the individual cannot endure, overcome, or persevere, their life may be irrevocably altered. Yet, often, with just a single second more of tenacity, the goddess of victory will smile upon you. Had Mo Yuan, like Creamy, succumbed to the immense psychological pressure, how might the course of cosmic history have unfolded? This has long been a topic of fervent debate among historians. Some assert that, regardless of Mo Yuan's ultimate fate, humanity's future would remain unaltered due to the objective laws of history. The reign of the Mirdar people would inevitably come to an end. Conversely, another faction of scholars contends that while heroes cannot alter the trajectory of history, they can influence who seizes the pivotal moments of history. It is precisely because Earthlings possessed a cadre of timeless heroes, akin to the stars, that they emerged as the fortunate ones in the annals of history. Regardless of how long their discourse may endure, even unto the very end of human history, one undeniable fact remains. On that fateful day, Mo Yuan undertook a reckless act that 99 of people would never consider. It was his audacious gamble, disregarding all else, that salvaged his own life and forged a new historical narrative. As he found himself ensnared by the relentless pursuit, Mon abruptly dove, plummeting from an altitude of 10,000 meters to 5,000, then 3,000, and finally 1,000 meters, skimming perilously close to the ground. Meanwhile, the Mirador aircraft remained in relentless pursuit, until the violent currents stirred the dust from the earth, and the colossal transport plane, mere meters from the ground, rolled violently at a dizzying rate of several dozen times per second, with the engine's afterburner flickering amidst the hazy sand, causing even the distant rocks to tremble ever so slightly. Damn it, super maneuverability, is it? This is certainly not your exclusive domain. Mon gritted his teeth, enduring the discomfort in his abdomen as the energy of the Blood Clan surged within him. Amidst the dizzying spins that could incapacitate an ordinary person, he strived to maintain a sliver of clarity in his mind, silently counting 30 degrees, 90 degrees, 60 degrees, now. Graymere transitioned from a rolling state to a lateral position, the immense shift in load causing Mon to spin several times. Had it not been for the protective neural buffering solution, he would have surely collided with the cabin wall. Even so, half of his body was numb, at the brink of losing consciousness. He commanded the aircraft to raise its nose and initiate secondary ignition. The high-speed transport aircraft surged towards the vastness of outer space. Utilizing the rapid rotation of the fighter jet to stir up dust, he obscured the opponent's line of sight. Simultaneously, the relentless spinning, occurring dozens of times per second, left the enemy's sensors bewildered, unable to predict when he would elevate the nose. Ultimately, he committed to a desperate ascent. This was Mon's ultra-low-altitude gyroscopic maneuverability. He succeeded. The Milda fighter jet pursued closely behind, yet Graymere had already entered outer space. With his last ounce of strength, Mon switched the control mode to automatic flight and commanded the computer to rendezvous with the suppression before following in Graymere's wake and succumbing to slumber. Dreams descended upon him. Everything felt so surreal. Earth, the days of your carefree childhood moments seemed like yesterday, yet were shrouded in vagueness. Playing with friends, frolicking with companions. His father and mother, arms outstretched, poised to embrace him. Suddenly, everything transformed. The veins on his father's neck became prominent, and Mon was horrified to discover that the fangs reaching towards his father emanated from his own mouth. No. In a panic, he recoiled, only to realize that his father seemed to be bonded to him, impossible to shake off. Blood surged into his throat, its flavor both exquisite and disquieting. His father's visage morphed, revealing a rugged face, Beck, his first sacrifice. Then, the countenance shifted again, transforming into Tyson, then the red-cloaked figure, followed by an unidentified wounded Sioux. The faces alternating like a revolving lantern, sending shivers through Mon's very soul. What am I? What do I represent? Why must I bear such a fate? Why did the Murdarians invade, relying on me to save humanity, and why must I become a vampire? In dreams, there were no answers. Mon felt despair, anxiety, and rage, culminating in a fierce bite, an attempt to penetrate the illusory figure before him. No, that soft, fragrant sensation was not a neck. What did I bite into? Ah, a delicate cry, which greeted Mon upon awakening, revealed a pair of beautiful, humiliated, and furious eyes. Chapter 1. More radiant than the stars in the Hydra star region, the beauty of the galaxy relished the tranquility of darkness amidst the ancient solitude. Though the starlight was resplendent, it merely served as the flickering red candle by her side, the fireflies in the forest, and the solitary lights upon the sea, all of which neither diminished her serenity nor detracted from her elegance. She lay in slumber, her sinuous curves embodying her exquisite beauty. 3 entwined crimson stars adorned her majestic crown, while the distant stars of Tezin 1 and 2 faced each other across a slender river of starlight, reminiscent of the famed lovers of Earth, the cowherd and the weaver girl. This celestial river naturally formed the bridge of her nose, and even more wondrously, a string of pearl-like celestial bodies encircled her form, bestowing upon her a necklace of blue and white hues. Below, the renowned giant wormhole black hole in the cosmos sparked endless contemplation. Had it not been for the upright beings on a tiny planet cradled in her embrace, she might have remained in eternal slumber until all starlight faded into oblivion. However, on the date of the 23rd era, year 1285 in the star calendar, as the warships broke through the wormhole amidst a dazzling cascade of light, her sweet dreams finally reached their conclusion. She awakened to witness a spectacle more radiant than starlight, as a figure with eyes brighter than the stars performed magnificently before her. The first fleet had emerged from the wormhole. The third fleet had assembled in the domain of Tezin I. The direct fleet had exited the wormhole. Excellent. listening with satisfaction to the reports from his subordinates, General Gomes. The governor of the Western Province could not help but smile. In recent years, his dominion in the Western Province had expanded more than twofold. The colonized population had surged by 300 billion, and the yield of titanium crystals had increased by 50%. All of this significantly enhanced his standing in the parliament. And within his own family, he had become a figure of considerable influence. Rumors suggested that the chairmanships of the military committee and the colonial committee in parliament were about to become vacant. Perhaps he might secure one of those prestigious positions. He turned his gaze, and the greatest contributor to his achievements today stood motionless, fixated on the vast stellar sea displayed on the holographic screen. With flowing black hair, a prominent nose, and lips tinged with an unusual crimson hue, his slender yet upright figure resembled a perfect shadow when his eyes were partially closed. But when they opened, they sparkled brighter than the stars themselves. Gomes let out a faint sigh and inquired, Duan Ming, is it truly necessary to deploy so many warships to assault a solitary planet? On the contrary, I worry that our forces may still be insufficient. Duan Ming smiled, reminiscent of a deity shrouded in mystery. How much strength could those rebels possess? Wasn't the corridor campaign supposed to have utterly annihilated their main forces? Gomes was perplexed. Yet he harbored an unwavering trust in his chief of staff, thus refraining from outright contradiction. My lord, do you genuinely believe we are merely confronting a ragtag band of the Cortez Alliance? You mean, indeed, their orchestrators should also reveal themselves. Sensing the fluctuations of light points on the star chart, Duan Ming understood that the entire mobile fleet summoned by the governor of Mirdar in the western sector had gathered on the western side of the Hydra star domain. These forces appeared formidable, yet against the hidden enemies lurking in the shadows, they might prove inadequate. Nonetheless, that was not the crux of the matter. He still held a trump card. Duanan, we have crossed the Persian galaxy. A miniature communicator implanted in his ear chimed, delivering the long-awaited news. Vampires. Are they about to go on a diet again? The psionic waves of Duan Ming traversed through the communicator, reaching out to his nearly soul companion 700 light-years away. His tone imbued with a rare jest. Indeed, with only 2 cups of blood to sustain him each day, lethargy enveloped him, making him drowsy even while walking and conversing. He fervently wished for the battle to commence swiftly, to capture a few enemies and indulge in a hearty feast of blood. The voice from the communicator resonated with amusement. Let Dia concoct some new potions. If she were to plump up like a sow, you could indulge a bit more. Farewell, I shall endure, he replied. I certainly do not wish to have a hefty pig waddling around me all day. Very well then, let us adhere to a vegetarian diet for 3 more days. After that, your phantom shall be unleashed for a grand slaughter. As the communication ended, Duan Ming opened his eyes, seemingly searching for the location of his friend. Alas! Confronted by the vast expanse of the starry sea, even with his keen sight, he could discern not a trace of his companion. You are always my greatest support amidst the flames of war. He silently wished for his friend's safety in his heart. Unbeknownst to him, 700 light-years away, Mo Yuan was uttering the same sentiments about another person. All is normal. No one has detected our presence. Next, I shall conduct a close reconnaissance of Planet 3 in the Tizen 2 system. Mo Yuan gazed at the screen, where pilots were tightly encased in their linked flight suits, and with concern asked, is there no issue? The Cortez Alliance has imposed strict blockades there, as it is their last bastion. Have you ever witnessed my mission fail? With a tone of haughty retort, she articulated an irrefutable truth. In a bittersweet smile, Mo Yuan could only wish her a safe journey. For you are my greatest support amidst the flames of conflict. Meanwhile, aboard the starry vessel of the Crosos fighter, a distinguished pilot from Milda gazed at the small cup of water in Mo Yuan's hand, fully aware that it contained a measure of blood. And she knew precisely whose it was. At times, she longed to switch places, to have Mo Yuan's veins coursing with her own lifeblood. Yet, she could not. She bore her own mission, destined to face an unending barrage of battles. Until Earth was liberated from the tyrannical reign of the Milda, her body was not her own. And her life was a sacrifice meant for all humanity. She was to sow death throughout the cosmos, allowing the tempest of her aircraft to obliterate any adversaries daring enough to obstruct her path. In truth, she had once failed a mission. A hand brushed against her head, reminding her that she was clad in a flight suit. As psychic energy flowed, she felt the gentle stir of her long hair, momentarily transported back to the day she first met him. On that fateful day, she had allowed an opponent's aircraft to slip from her grasp. Chapter 2. The Duke's demise. The emotions concealed within that gaze were profoundly intricate, rendering Mo Yuan momentarily speechless, lost in the present, oblivious to her surroundings. and entirely unaware of the imminent dangers. For a fleeting 3 to 5 seconds, all that existed in Mo Yuan's world were those exquisite, humiliated, and furious eyes, brimming with sorrow, disappointment, agony, hatred, confusion, and helplessness. Then he noticed a delicate yet sorrowful visage, a gracefully elongated neck, and a small bite mark adorning the corner of those rosy lips. Climby, what is the meaning of this? A handgun was aimed at the head of Dr. Yor from the Sioux clan, and the one wielding it was none other than Climby. Boss. This stubborn woman refuses to let you examine her. Even with the gun pressed against her forehead, it is futile. You, however, might succeed in waking her. My lady from the Sioux clan can be quite fierce at times. Came a lewd chuckle from the side. It was none other than the governor of the Sioux clan. A veil of mist shrouded those beautiful eyes. Betrayal by one's own is the most profound wound. The treachery of someone one holds in esteem can shatter the most resilient heart. Climby adjusted Mo Yuan into a more comfortable position and whispered, Boss, take a good rest. Soon we shall meet the significant figure for our rendezvous. It turned out that Mo Yuan had overexerted himself, a novice untrained for such extreme exertion, and had fainted instantly. The disorientation spread to everyone in the transport pod. Once the transport aircraft rendezvoused with the counterattack vessel, a squad of Mierda soldiers guided them to a chamber situated in the midsection of the warship for rest. One by one, the group regained consciousness, yet Mo Yuan remained in a deep slumber. Climby forced her to examine Mo Yuan's condition. But this seemingly fragile woman adamantly refused. Even when thrust before Mo Yuan with a gun at her temple, she stood her ground. As they continued to argue, Mo Yuan suddenly bit Yor's lip and slowly awakened. It is rumored that the traitor associated with the Sioux tribe is aboard the ship, and he will arrive shortly. If we manage to capture him, it will be a significant achievement. Creamy whispered excitedly in Mo Yuan's ear. Mo Yuan discreetly tapped him, signaling him to be silent. For the Sioux tribe's governor was present, and they must not arouse his suspicion. The governor appeared disinterested in their conversation, leaning against a chair in the corner with his eyes closed in repose. The others, aside from Lucian who sat calmly, regarded Mo Yuan with a sense of reverence. Silence enveloped the room, creating a somewhat oppressive atmosphere. After approximately half an hour of this stillness, the door was pushed open, and a group entered in succession. They have arrived. Mo Yuan exchanged a glance with Creamy, preparing to act. Lucian and the others shifted nervously, having received Creamy's instructions to seal the door as soon as they engaged, leaving the individuals inside for Mo Yuan to handle. Having witnessed Mo Yuan's confrontation with the red-clad figures and his subsequent ruthless treatment of the wounded from the Sioux tribe, no one doubted his combat prowess. However, they feared becoming entangled in his conflict. The first to enter were 4 guards, who fanned out at the doorway. Following them was a tall, slender figure with piercing eyes and a hawkish nose, exuding an air of menace. Upon entering, he brazenly scanned the room, his gaze briefly lingering on the Sioux tribe's governor, to whom he gave a slight nod, disregarding the others with a mere glance. Finally, upon locking eyes with Creamy, he was taken aback. Creamy, as if struck by lightning, exclaimed, Lord Patriarch. The visitor was none other than the patriarch of the Sippy family, one of the 3 illustrious families of Milda, Duke Polnek Brute, the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Empire. No wonder Creamy was taken aback. His own patriarch, a towering pillar of the Empire, was colluding with traitors, striking a profound blow to his spirit. Duke Polnek abruptly turned, fixing his gaze upon the Sioux clan's governor. What is the meaning of this? The governor of the Sioux clan sneered coldly, his countenance devoid of any semblance of respect. My Lord Duke, did your kin not anticipate the current predicament when they sought my audience? Duke Polnek retorted, What? Who did I send to seek you? Suddenly, the governor bellowed. How did you slay the envoy of the dynasty? Duke Polnek, bewildered, inquired, What envoy? You, You are not of the Sioux clan. As if a realization struck him, he waved his hand, signaling his guards to act, but in an instant, 4 of them appeared stunned, releasing their grips as their weapons levitated eerily in the air. A psychic. The Duke was engulfed in shock, turning to flee the chamber, but the governor raised an eyebrow, and the door closed soundlessly behind him, fixating on the governor. The Duke forced himself to declare, This is my domain. If you wish to depart unscathed, you must not lay a hand on me. The governor threw back his head in laughter. You have slain the envoy, and you still wish to preserve your life? What of Duke Milda? I regard you as nothing more than a dog. Once, now, and in the future, you have feasted on scraps for days and grown fat, yet a dog remains a dog. Should you dare bite your master, do you truly believe I would spare your wretched life? The room was suffused with an intangible pressure. Only Mo Yuan fared slightly better, while the others were rendered immobile. It was unexpected that this Sioux ethnic governor possessed such formidable psychic powers, capable of subduing everyone solely through his spiritual pressure. Mo Yuan's mental strength had yet to fully recuperate, so he pretended to be subdued, secretly gathering his energy to deliver a decisive blow. The Duke, losing all semblance of composure, shouted in panic, "Help! Someone, please." The governor responded with a cold laugh, "This place is already sealed off by me. Do not worry. I will ensure you experience a slow demise. Allow me to present a few spectacles." His gaze fixated on a certain guard, who, in a horrific blaze, was consumed in agony, ultimately reducing to a pile of blackened remnants. Soon after, a second guard met the same fate, followed by a third. Suddenly, Duke Bornik rolled his eyes back and collapsed onto the floor. The governor sneered disdainfully, "A dog is merely a dog, devoid of any spirit." He then turned to Mo Yuan, saying, "You little pup, was it you who struck the first blow?" Realizing the dire situation, Mo Yuan disregarded his waning psychic energy and summoned the full force of his bloodline power. A crimson beam erupted from his forehead, aimed at the governor. The governor smirked slightly as a torrent of potent psychic energy burst forth from his eyes, shattering the bloodline attack into fragments. The residual force sent Mo Yuan tumbling backward, crashing against the wall. "You little pup," he mocked, "with such meager psychic energy? Do you truly believe you can contend with a member of the Holy Dynasty without resorting to treachery? I shall make you taste the essence of death." The governor's gaze intensified, as if his psychic energy had taken a tangible form, coalescing in the air into an ethereal long blade. With a gentle stroke, a crimson line appeared on Mo Yuan's arm. A subsequent sweep resulted in a significant portion of flesh being severed from his abdomen. "I shall carve you to pieces." The eyes were terrifying. Mo Yuan had never encountered such madness in a gaze, nor had he imagined that a pair of eyes could unleash such formidable power. In the blink of an eye, his body was mercilessly sliced with 17 or 18 cuts, leaving scarcely a whole piece of flesh. Yet, he did not utter a cry of pain. Only defiance resided within his eyes. He was not one to concede defeat. "Such a tenacious pup, possessing more spirit than your master," the governor remarked, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. As the psychic energy coalesced, ready to strike, Creamy and Lucianth, their eyes ablaze with urgency, found themselves paralyzed by the governor's oppressive aura, utterly helpless. Yer had already turned away, unable to bear witness to the impending tragedy. Others were restlessly subdued by the psychic force, seemingly resigned to Mo Yuan's grim fate. Suddenly, the door was flung open, startling the governor, who swiftly turned to unleash his formidable energy blade upon the intruder. After all, aboard this vessel, there were no allies. Whoever it was, they would be slain without hesitation. Then Mo Yuan beheld a pair of eyes that shone like stars. This was their first encounter. It was also his initial glimpse of the star eyes. Chapter 3. The enigmatic star eyes, a radiance of blue and white shimmered, sparkling like stars, dreamlike in its beauty. The potent psychic energy surged like waves, akin to the currents of the sea. In an instant, from those eyes surged the torrents of 100 rivers. Two streams of psychic energy collided silently, sending shockwaves that rippled through the room. Mo Yuan felt a piercing pain in his head, a cold and tearing agony. Strangely, the energy of the Blood Clan resonated with this shockwave, surging forth in waves of familiarity. The governor was thrown off balance by the force of the impact, staring in astonishment and fury at the uninvited guest who had suddenly intruded. The newcomer wore the uniform of a Milda military officer, the silver attire accentuating his slender frame and tall stature. His sword-like brows and prominent nose exuded an air of gallantry, while his neck-length hair, far from appearing disheveled, lent him an effortless elegance. His lips were thin, tinged with a hint of rosy hue, softening his commanding presence. Most astonishing were his eyes, now radiating a mesmerizing blend of blue and white, with flecks of starlight swirling within the pupils, emanating an overwhelming psychic force. Could such a figure truly exist among the Milda? The governor found it hard to believe. The newcomer spoke. "It seems Duke Polnek has gloriously perished. If my assumptions are correct, you must be the architect behind this rebellion of the Sioux clan. Am I right?" His voice held a chill, reminiscent of a mountain spring, refreshing yet not frigid, carrying an unexpectedly pleasant undertone. The governor laughed heartily. "To claim I am the mastermind is to overestimate my role. Indeed, I sparked the Sioux clan's rebellion, but you Milda have more to contend with than just the Sioux. Save your breath. You shall gain nothing from me." The man smiled faintly. "I have no intention of allowing you to live." "What? This declaration caught the governor completely off guard. The individual remarked, "Consider the ramifications should news spread that both the Minister of Internal Affairs of Milda and the rebellious leader have perished within the same chamber. Do you truly wish to plunge Milda into chaos? And as for your psychic abilities, indeed, you are not a Milda resident. Who, then, are you?" With a subtle flick of his right hand, the moisture in the air coalesced into a translucent longsword, which deftly severed the throat of the governor. "I, like you, am one who yearns for the downfall of Milda." As the governor breathed his last, the radiance in the man's eyes gradually dimmed, narrowing to mere slits as if he were in a state of feigned slumber. Yet, the palpable aura of danger emanating from him left no one truly convinced of his lethargy. The man's face slowly rotated, seemingly capable of perceiving each person present with clarity. From right to left, his invisible gaze swept across the faces of Lucian, Taka, Yar, Crimey, and others, finally resting upon Mo Yuan. With an intense flutter of his eyelids and a moment of silence, he slowly spoke. "Vampire? Red Dragon?" Mo Yuan, perplexed, inquired, "Who are you? Do I know you?" The man remained silent, gesturing toward the injured individuals on the ground. "You are gravely wounded and require a substantial intake of blood. Do you desire my assistance? Choose one and speak." Before Mo Yuan could respond, he seized her, presenting her delicate neck to Mo Yuan's lips. "How about this one? It appears her blood is quite abundant." Mo Yuan, summoning his remaining strength, swiftly seized Yuer and pushed her behind him, exclaiming, "I appreciate your goodwill, but I have no interest in drinking the blood of women." "Oh?" The man paused, pointing at Calliope. "What about him?" Mo Yuan replied, "To drink the blood of a coward would only make me timid." "And him?" The man gestured towards another individual. "He has athlete's foot. It's contagious." "What about him?" "His body emits a foul odor, which does not entice me." "And him?" "He's bald. Just looking at him is repulsive." The man chuckled. "I see. You refuse to drink anyone's blood, do you?" Mo Yuan declared proudly, "To drink the blood of a comrade, of those who have shielded me from bullets, is simply out of the question." "What about her?" "She's not one of your comrades, is she?" "She saved my brother." "The same applies." The man sighed slightly. "How stubborn you are, son of Mobai." Mo Yuan's heart trembled, and he was about to respond when the man waved his hand, directing a stream of water towards Luxian. "You won't drink the blood of the living." "But surely the dead pose no issue?" Mo Yuan was taken aback. Disregarding the pain from his recent torture, he rushed forward, positioning himself between the man and Luxian. A blood dagger materialized, blocking the oncoming stream of water, which struck the dagger, producing a plume of white smoke before evaporating back into vapor. The man turned around and, with a swift motion, aimed a punch at Yar. Mo Yuan, unable to react in time, leaped forward to shield her with his own body. Upon impact, he emitted a gasp and spat out a mouthful of blood as the opponent's spiritual energy surged into him, enveloping his limbs in a thick layer of icy numbness. Yet, remarkably, the pain throughout his body began to diminish. Observing Mo Yuan collapse, the assailant stepped forward, coldly declaring, "I shall slay this woman to feed you." With that, he opened his eyes, radiating a blue-white brilliance that flickered like the light of distant stars. Those were the star eyes. A word unexpectedly surfaced in Mo Yuan's mind. The method of the spiritual attack and the nature of those eyes felt hauntingly familiar, evoking a bittersweet sense of nostalgia intertwined with profound helplessness. Suddenly, he summoned the last vestiges of his strength. His arm transformed into a burning long blade, sweeping through the air with an effortless arc. With a speed surpassing lightning and a swiftness quicker than thunder, it struck at the center of the man's brow, the very vulnerability of the star eyes. The star-like radiance flickered out, and Mo Yuan lunged forward, sinking his teeth into the man's shoulder. Instantly, a cool, rich stream of blood flowed into his mouth. This blood bore a powerful essence of spiritual energy, and Mo Yuan felt his wounds healing at an astonishing rate. The man's complexion rapidly drained of color, yet a faint, elusive smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Is my blood to your liking?" he murmured, leaning closer to Mo Yuan's ear. "What?" Mo Yuan gasped, releasing his grip. "Since you refuse to drink their blood, you shall have mine instead." His tone was nonchalant, as if he were discussing a trivial matter. "You, because I am your friend." Chapter 4. Natural friends. The ship was already under our control when a figure rushed in through the doorway, astonished by the scene within. "Who are you?" "Release him." Without waiting for Mo Yuan's response, the intruder immediately launched an attack, a small white object spinning through the air towards Mo Yuan. Transforming into a long blade, Mo Yuan deflected the projectile, shattering it into fragments. At that moment, he discerned that the newcomer was a woman, also clad in mulatto military attire. though hers was black. 3 gold stripes adorned her right shoulder, while her chest bore 2 large silver pentagrams and 3 smaller stars. Upon seeing her face, Mo Yuan was momentarily taken aback. Never had he encountered a woman so strikingly spirited. Her features could not exactly be deemed exquisite. Yet they were far from unattractive. An ordinarily plain visage radiated an undeniable aura of valor, dimming everything else in the room by 3 degrees. As if a spotlight in the universe existed solely for her, making her the focal point of life's stage. In her eyes, the man before her appeared as a cold, silent blade, exuding an air of latent peril. It seemed as though all murderous intent in the world encircled him. Confronting him was akin to facing death itself. Silently, both parties gathered their strength, poised to unleash a fatal strike. Mo Yuan was intrigued to notice that the woman's right hand emanated a familiar luminescence. He even recognized that her weapon was a ghost stone from Earth, and the next move she would execute was destined to tear through the fabric of space. Why do I feel such a familiar connection with these 2 individuals? Halt. The man in white struggled to speak, intervening in the tense standoff between the 2. Welcome. Red Dragon. What? Mo Yuan was puzzled by the title. With a flick of his hand, the man in white unleashed a peculiar surge of spiritual energy that enveloped the entire room. Mo Yuan was immediately overcome by a dizzying sensation, and just before losing consciousness, a multitude of fragmented images flashed through his mind: the joy of victory in battle, the laughter of friends reuniting, the anguish of helplessness, and the sorrow of losing a beloved. Yet, the protagonist of these memories seemed not to be him, but rather his father. What is the truth? He whispered this question to himself before succumbing to darkness. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a tidy cabin. The room was nearly devoid of furnishings, save for the bed where Mo Yuan lay and a few chairs scattered around. Holographic star maps adorned the walls, making him feel as though he were at the very heart of the cosmos. The enigmatic man in white and the woman in black were seated beside him, gazing at him with concern. Their expressions bore the unmistakable warmth of kinship, and in that instant, Mo Yuan was convinced that these 2 were allies, not adversaries. However, he remained perplexed about their identities and intentions. Yet, one question demanded clarity. Where are my comrades? The man in white offered a friendly smile. Rest assured, your friends are safe and sound. They have returned to the base. I harbor no ill will towards them. Sensing Mo Yuan's confusion, the man took the initiative to introduce himself. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Duan Ming. She is Xiqing. You recently crossed paths on planet Tim 4. The remarkable pilot stands before you as this very woman. Mo Yuan scrutinized Xiqing, and her commanding presence dispelled any doubts he harbored. Even in her quietude, she exuded the intensity of a raging storm. Thankfully, had he collided with the ground during his super maneuver, the 5 dragon envoys would have been reduced to merely 2. Xiqing spoke coldly. This must be fate's design. Duan Ming sighed. I had initially only intended for Qingqing to force down that transport aircraft. Little did I know you would be aboard. Due to Qingqing's failure to act, I had no choice but to deploy the assault team for a strike on the suppression vessel. Yet it is precisely through this turn of events that we have encountered you. Upon hearing the word failure, a displeased expression crossed Xiqing's face. Duan Ming cast a glance at her, stating, Qingqing, if you cannot transcend the notions of victory and defeat, your achievements in life will never surpass those of your father. Xiqing retorted defiantly, can he pilot a fighter jet? Duan Ming smiled slightly. Do you truly believe that downing more enemy aircraft can alter the fate of Earth? As Xiqing prepared to counter, Mo Yuan interjected, both of you, I find myself perplexed by many matters. Might you alleviate my uncertainties? Duan Ming chuckled. It seems Uncle Mo has kept many secrets from you. However, we now require your strength. Rest assured, I shall divulge all that I know. What would you like to know first? Why do I feel so familiar with you? What is the connection between us? Duan Ming spoke leisurely. The red dragon in your hand is a legacy passed down from my great-grandfather, while the one I possess belongs to your father. Is it possible for you to be unfamiliar with me? He raised his right hand, revealing the palm towards Mo Yuan, where a small black dragon spiraled with vivid life. Mo Yuan exclaimed, you have one too. Duan Ming gestured to Xiqing, who extended her palm, showcasing a white dragon dancing in her grasp. You all? Duan Ming replied. This is the source of our spiritual energy, as well as our duty. He gazed upward, his eyes partially closed, as if ensnared in the vortex of time. Spiritual energy, as a peculiar form of mental power, is beyond explanation in its origin. Even with the advanced technology of the Maladans, they cannot fabricate spiritual beings. In Malada, those who possess spiritual energy automatically ascend to the ranks of nobility. One might even say that the ruling class of the Meladens consists of spiritual practitioners. Among the various races of the universe, spiritual practitioners are distinguished by their enigmatic powers, holding esteemed positions. On Earth, the original spiritual practitioners were 5 individuals wielding mysterious ancient jades, known as the 5 dragon envoys. According to my father's research, the origins of these 5 jades are likely tied to a certain mysterious race in the cosmos. However, we still know far too little about their true nature. When Earthlings merge with the ancient jades, they unlock their own mental powers, thereby acquiring spiritual energy. In the past, the 5 dragon envoys accomplished numerous earth-shattering feats, particularly my great-grandfather, who instilled fear in countless enemies both domestic and abroad during the 1910s. Your father, Bai, a descendant of the Black Dragon Order, also made a name for himself in the turbulent decades of the 1930s and 1940s. However, these accomplishments have since lost their significance. By a stroke of fate, our parents discovered that other intelligent beings in the cosmos were aware of Earth's existence and were poised to launch an invasion. At that time, a rift emerged. My father and Qingqing's father believed that as the new generation of psychics, we must shoulder the responsibility and stand at the forefront against extraterrestrial threats. In contrast, your father wished for you to lead an ordinary life, which led him to depart from the group and conceal the secrets of our abilities from you. Yet, fate is capricious, and you found yourself marked by the death sign of a slave. Thus he had no choice but to bestow upon you the power of the Red Dragon. Mo Yuan interjected, "How could you possibly know about my death sign?" Duan Ming replied, "Of course, we must maintain contact with Earth. Qingqing returned last week and met your father, who spoke of your situation. He urged us to keep an eye on your whereabouts, and to our surprise, just after Qingqing's return, we encountered you." Mo Yuan asked, "You can maintain contact with Earth?" Duan Ming responded, "Indeed. Otherwise, do you truly believe that we alone could challenge the dominion of the Milda people?" Chapter 5, The Tragic Earth. Duan Ming continued. "I am currently a Level 2 staff officer under the command of Governor Gomes in the western province of Milda, primarily engaged in military planning. Additionally, I oversee communications with the slave training camps hovering above Earth. Each time a liaison officer boards a plane, I ensure that Qingqing is the pilot. This represents our sole opportunity to communicate with the Earth government." He went on, "The federal government of Earth intends to exploit the Milda people's selection of slaves to infiltrate spies and covertly steal Milda technology, with the aim of constructing an interstellar army leveraging advanced technology to ultimately achieve liberation for humanity. However, do you believe this plan has any substantial feasibility?" Mo Yuan inquired. "As of now, how many spies have successfully infiltrated the ranks of the Milda people?" Duan Ming replied, "Yesterday there were 2, and today, with you, there are 3. In the short term, it seems unlikely that new recruits will join us. The burden of overthrowing Milda's rule now rests upon our shoulders." Mo Yuan pondered for a moment before expressing his dismay. "From my observations over the past few months, the prospect of achieving liberation for Earth appears exceedingly bleak. The Milda's power is far too formidable. With just the few of us, I remain uncertain how we can dismantle their regime. Even if we were to acquire Milda's technology, how could Earth conceal the construction of a space battleship from the Milda? Under their watchful eyes, we are utterly incapable of establishing new industrial facilities, let alone a military." Duan Ming smiled and turned to Yi Xiqing, saying, "Qingqing, upon your return, how is the situation on Earth? You haven't yet shared that with me." Yi Xiqing's steadfast face twitched slightly, and her resolute eyes shimmered with unshed tears. After regaining her composure, she spoke, "The situation on Earth is far worse now than it was a year ago when the Milda first invaded. Although the temperature has stabilized and mass fatalities have ceased, a myriad of issues have only just begun to emerge. The most pressing concern is food scarcity. Due to drastic climate changes, arable land has significantly diminished, and it is projected that next year's food production will only reach 30 of pre-invasion levels. Presently, a comprehensive food control system has been implemented across the planet, with all agricultural endeavors strictly regulated under meticulous planning. The cultivation of nearly all cash crops has come to a halt. People can only purchase food with supply vouchers, yet even this measure falls short, as rations are insufficient. An ordinary adult is allotted a mere 25 pounds of rice or equivalent staple foods per month, alongside 1 pound of vegetables, 3 ounces of meat, half a spoonful of sugar, and a modest amount of cooking oil. Special populations, such as pregnant women and infants, receive some milk, while concerning the elderly, a proposal has been put forth by certain lawmakers for the humane extermination of individuals aged 80 and above, in the interest of humanity's future. Mo Yuan recalled his parents on Earth and anxiously inquired, "What has become of them?" Qing reassured him, "The government is still taking good care of them, providing rations equivalent to those for special personnel. They receive 3 pounds of meat each month, and there is a sufficient supply of cooking oil. However, Uncle Mo often gives away his food to help neighbors in need. The last time I saw him, he appeared relatively well, though he had grown quite thin." Mo Yuan felt a sharp pang in his heart as he envisioned his father's frail and diminutive figure. His father's health was far from robust. Even the provisions deemed acceptable for specialized personnel, as stated by Qing, amounted to rather inadequate sustenance. He even allocated a portion of his rations to assist others, which made Mo Yuan ponder the state of his father's well-being. Qing continued, engrossed in his own discourse, "Then there is the housing dilemma. As the glaciers continue to expand, many regions have become inhospitable to human habitation. The government is currently undertaking extensive efforts to relocate populations to tropical areas. However, this has exacerbated tensions among diverse ethnic groups, with various interest factions embroiled in fierce rivalries. Additionally, the scarcity of water resources in the tropics has compounded the situation. Before my return, the government openly acknowledged over 300 instances of ethnic conflict, resulting in more than 100,000 fatalities. The energy crisis is equally pressing. The demand for energy, both for production and daily living, has surged dramatically, further straining the Earth's already dwindling energy reserves. Moreover, the construction of new refineries, power plants, and supporting infrastructure requires considerable time. Currently, the availability of electricity for daily use in most regions of the planet is precarious. Statistics reveal that in New York alone, approximately 20,000 individuals have succumbed to the cold due to an inability to secure heating. Transportation has completely collapsed, and communication is equally dismal. At present, acquiring a plane ticket or gaining permission for family visits is akin to an insurmountable challenge. Ordinary citizens require the approval of municipal-level authorities or hire to purchase tickets. And travel applications in major cities are generally backlogged for 6 months, with new requests rarely granted. In an effort to conserve energy and exert stringent control during these extraordinary times, communication has been heavily regulated, rendering once ubiquitous mobile phones as worthless as scrap metal. Amidst this turmoil, human folly further exacerbates the situation. Certain officials exploit food supply certificates for personal gain, while some enterprises engage in rampant energy profiteering, compounding the already dire circumstances. Qing hesitated momentarily before continuing. "Although I have only spent 2 days on this planet, several experiences remain indelibly etched in my memory. In the streets of the former capital of the Huaxian nation, countless young mothers cradled their newborns, begging for alms. As a significant portion of government-issued milk was embezzled by certain officials, leaving them with only watered-down rations. Each day, the streets witnessed the tragic abandonment of hundreds of lifeless infants, subsequently collected by sanitation workers and discarded into refuse piles. In the southern region, the largest city of Huaxia, known as the New Pearl of the East, 2 orderly lines of people formed along the streets. On one side stood young girls, merely 17 or 18 years old, clad in flimsy garments against the biting wind, hoping to attract the attention of an immigration facilitator. By sacrificing their virtue, they dreamed of relocating to tropical lands. On the opposite side, robust men displayed their physiques, for only those with exceptional bodies were afforded opportunities to mine in Africa or extract oil in the Middle East. This was still fortunate compared to certain areas in the western parts of Huaxia, where a maiden's chastity was worth less than a pound of coal, or 2 cups of milk, or scarcely enough to exchange for a meager portion of pork. I have heard tales of an individual working at a food distribution center, who reportedly exchanged 2 women daily. Similar occurrences are said to proliferate in other corners of the world. Experts predict that if the situation continues to deteriorate, 100 million lives may be lost by next winter. Duan Ming solemnly asked Mo Yuan, "What are your feelings?" Mo Yuan's eyes glistened with moisture. He had not wept amidst the gunfire on Timmy 3, yet now he felt an overwhelming urge to cry aloud. He murmured, "If we do not strive to change this, then our parents, our families, all our loved ones and friends, they will be lost. Indeed, regardless of the challenges we face, we must confront them head-on. For we have no retreat left," Duan Ming asserted resolutely. Qing gritted her teeth, declaring, "I will crush anyone who stands in our way." I approach my writing with utmost sincerity. The standards regarding food supply are adapted from with slight modifications. Regrettably, I could not find the supply standards for cooking oil. If anyone knows, please share. Thank you. A book review would be appreciated. Chapter 6, Reflections on the World, Part 1. However, after the excitement subsided, a profound sense of helplessness washed over Mo Yuan. What could we, just the three of us, possibly achieve? Duan Ming smiled, his eyes sparkling like stars. Looking into his eyes, Mo Yuan suddenly felt that there was nothing impossible in this world. Ultimately, it is humanity that determines its own fate. We are merely the prologue. The dawn of a monumental era in history. Turning to He Xiqing, Duan Ming gently inquired, Qingqing, what are your thoughts on the current cosmic situation? He Xiqing coldly remarked, I am unaware of the circumstances. All I know is to eliminate every adversary before me. Duan Ming shrugged and said to Mo Yuan, you see. She is precisely that kind of person, a combat prodigy, yet politically naive. We all emerged from the ranks of slave soldiers a year ago. But aside from the increasing number of downed enemy aircraft, she knows nothing else. There are matters that will require your insight in the future. Allow me to first introduce the current situation. I reckon you have not encountered this information while in the slave army. The segment of the universe we are acquainted with is dominated by the Milda. You may know that the new stars in the Milky Way are primarily concentrated around four major arms: the Orion arm, the Perseus arm, the Sagittarius arm, and the 3,000 parsec arm, with our solar system nestled within the inner side of the Orion arm. The Milda originated from a third-magnitude star located on the outer edge of the Orion arm, and their societal structure is a semi-democratic system governed by an elite group. Although the supreme authority lies with the parliament, all members are appointed by the royal family and the nobility. Most nobles are psychics, though there are exceptions, such as the foolish duke who just perished, who inherited his title purely by bloodline. Presently, the most influential families in Milda are the Sabai, Dulus, and Urian, with the empire's key officials rotating among them. 3 centuries ago, Milda embarked on a path of interstellar expansion, and after countless wars, no force within the galaxy dares to confront them. They have colonized over 300 planets and directly control approximately 200 planets as military strongholds, with more than 1,000 planets providing them with various resources, including minerals. For the majority of extraterrestrial beings, the Mildari demonstrate their power and subsequently subjugate them, compelling them to provide slaves, much like their actions towards Earth. Additionally, some aliens, due to their possession of unique technologies or precious resources, are treated as allies, with the Mildari sharing a portion of the benefits, albeit these allies must comply with the Mildari in military and diplomatic matters. The Mildari are not content with merely dominating the Milky Way. About a century ago, they broke free from the galaxy and have since expanded their influence into over 10 extragalactic star systems, which encompasses the extent of the universe as I know it. Presently, the Mildari have divided their dominion into 6 regions, with 3 administrative zones within the Milky Way. The first is a central district directly controlled by the Mildari Council, which, in addition to the Mildari homeworld of Milvi, encompasses 152 colonized planets, boasting a population of 110 billion. The second is the western province of the galaxy, west of the central district, which contains 34 colonized planets and a population of 3 billion. The third is the eastern province of the galaxy, east of the central district, which comprises 41 colonized planets and a population of 2 billion. Furthermore, there are 3 provinces controlling extragalactic territories: the Storm Province, encompassing 32 colonized planets and a population of 180 million, the Star Matrix Province, with 29 colonized planets and a population of 150 million, and the Border Province, which holds 18 colonized planets and a population of 80 million. By population, I refer to the residents possessing the citizenship of Milda. In addition, each planet is home to a significant number of slaves, who toil in various menial jobs and service industries that citizens are unwilling to undertake. According to the latest statistics from the Milda Ministry of Internal Affairs, the average ratio of slaves to citizens stands at 2-to-1 within the galaxy and 3-to-1 in extragalactic realms. Aside from children born of citizen parents or those conceived through state-sanctioned artificial insemination automatically acquiring citizenship, one must demonstrate an exceptional contribution to Milda society to obtain citizenship, followed by approval from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The simplest route, of course, is to serve valiantly on the front lines as an ally of Milda. A rather peculiar phenomenon is that most known civilizations, including the Milda and our Earth, are of human origin. Although the differing environments of each planet have led to significant variations among races, genetic mapping confirms that we are indeed all human. The Milda recruit slaves and allies exclusively from these human worlds, while their policy towards non-human civilizations is one of resolute extermination. Mo Yuandao remarked, what does this imply? Is there a possibility for cooperation between us and the Milda? Duan chuckled. Cooperation? Don't be naive. Haven't various ethnic groups on Earth always been at odds with one another? Genuine collaboration has been elusive. I suspect there may be secrets regarding the origin of humanity embedded within this, perhaps suggesting that we share a common ancestor with the Milda. However, such matters are not ours to ponder. The pressing concern at present is to overthrow the rule of the Mildines. As for the origins of humanity, that is a quandary best left for future archaeologists to unravel. The Mildines are not a monolithic entity. Like Earth, they too experience power struggles and political rivalries. The leaders of the 5 major provinces have traditionally been aristocrats from 3 prominent families, while the royal family maintains control over a significant portion of the military in the directly governed regions. Deep-seated conflicts exist among them. For instance, the territory where Earth is located falls under the jurisdiction of the central authority, yet General Gomes of the Western Province audaciously claimed Earth for his province, capitalizing on his prior discovery. Currently, the protocol for newly discovered colonies follows this principle. The one who discovers it first governs it. As for the ill-fated Duke Bornek, he was merely a disruptor in our midst. Mo Yundao inquired, so, our Western Province is no longer under the authority of the Sebi family? Duan Ming replied, indeed. The governor here, General Gomes, is a distant cousin of the current head of the Julian family, Geist Julian. His connection to the family is rather tenuous. While he holds a significant position as a regional governor, he has yet to penetrate the core of familial power. This individual is precisely the one we intend to exploit. Mo Yuan asked, how do we intend to exploit him? Duan Ming calmly responded, having shared so much, have you not yet discerned the Mildians' greatest vulnerability? Chapter 7, A Discourse on the World, Part 2. Mo Yuan inquired, vulnerability? All I hear is how formidable they are. Having developed into such a vast scale in merely 3 centuries, the Mildines are truly remarkable. Qingqing, what are your thoughts? Could their weakness lie in their vulnerability? During my training, I also discovered that no opponent has compelled me to exert my utmost effort. Duan Ming chuckled wryly. He was often curious about this woman. Did her mind encompass anything beyond aggression, assault, maneuvering, target locking, and launching? He picked up a cup and pressed a button on a water dispenser as the infusion of water filled the room with a rich aroma of tea. This is tea I cultivated aboard the ship. I never expected that tea plants from Earth could flourish in space, offering a unique flavor. Would you care to try? Mo Yuan shook his head, nearly forgetting that your favorite beverage is blood. This half-jesting tone left Mo Yuan unable to retort. After sipping his tea, Duan Ming returned to the subject. Let me give you a hint. Do you know how many individuals are in our fleet? Mo Yuan replied, surely. There are tens of thousands? Duan Ming continued. The direct fleet of the governor of the western province of Mildar comprises 58 warships, with 4 interstellar carriers each having a crew capacity of 50,000, 24 battleships with a crew of 10,000 each, and 30 cruisers with 3,000 crew members apiece. Just the crew alone amounts to 530,000. Moreover, the entire fleet is equipped with over 100 air squadrons and more than 100,000 aircraft, with the number of pilots exceeding 200,000. In terms of the army, excluding the conscripted soldiers, this fleet is supplemented by 10 regular Milda legions, totaling over 500,000 troops alongside various technical units. The entire fleet comprises more than 1.5 million regular Milda soldiers. The 10 mobile fleets in the western provinces boast a combined strength exceeding 15 million. In total, the Milda mobile fleet numbers over 100 million personnel. Mo Yuan expressed astonishment, exclaiming, so many? Duan Ming responded with a smile, this is merely the tip of the iceberg. Consider the 300 colonial planets. Each one requires its own dedicated self-defense forces to counter potential assaults. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs data, the average strength of each planet's defense force is 100,000, which adds up to 30 million soldiers. One significant contributor to this number includes the 200 military fortress planets. It is essential to recognize the vastness of the universe. Even though interstellar spacecraft possess superluminal curve flight technology, the fuel for antimatter engines is finite. Typically, a spaceship can sustain a travel range of only several thousand light-years. To traverse from one end of the galaxy to the other, or to venture into extragalactic systems tens of thousands of light-years away, one must utilize wormholes. By navigating through subspace, spacecraft can achieve zero energy consumption. Consequently, establishing fortress planets at the entrances of wormhole passages or converting existing planets into military fortresses becomes pivotal in controlling cosmic trade routes. Milda has stationed heavy troops on each fortress planet, averaging over 1 million personnel, with the total number of garrisoned forces exceeding 200 million. Additionally, energy planets require a certain number of defense units, cumulatively bringing the total count of regular Milda forces to over 400 million. If we consider the paramilitary forces maintaining public order and the troops dispatched to various colonies, such as the Mirda spacecraft orbiting Earth, along with the military-affiliated research institutions, the total number of the Mirda army may approximate 800 million. What are your thoughts? Mo Yuan stammered. Such overwhelming power. Do we Earthlings have no hope? Duan inquired with a smile. Have you not considered the other side of the issue? What? Xiqing interjected. Are you suggesting that although their numbers are vast, their combat effectiveness is lacking? If we train an elite force, we could sweep through the galaxy. Duan, upon hearing this, solemnly corrected Xiqing. Qingqing, first and foremost, do not apply your standards to everyone. You are one of a kind. And it is unlikely that you would find another warrior as exceptional as yourself in this galaxy. Secondly, remember, there is no such thing as a trained elite. There are only seasoned warriors. Anyone who has survived 100 battles will inevitably adapt to warfare better than someone who merely practices diligently day in and day out. Currently, on Earth, there are only 3 individuals with combat experience in Star Wars. Mo Yuan asked, then, what weaknesses do the Mirda possess? Indeed, they have a weakness, population. Population? Yes. Population, Duan replied, sipping his tea and speaking confidently. The Mirda have conquered vast star realms, yet their numbers are merely 4 times that of Earth. Currently, we find ourselves in a relative period of peace. Their military forces constitute 4% of the population. What does this signify? It implies that their mobilization potential is exceedingly limited. In the event of a large-scale war, they would struggle to sustain the expansion of their armed forces. Even more troubling is the fact that a substantial portion of their troops is dispersed across the vastness of space, rendering their mobile forces severely constrained. Consider this. Merely to suppress a minor rebellion by the Sioux tribe, 1/10 of the mobile forces in the western provinces was tied up for 2 months. Had it not been for my meticulously devised extermination plan, I fear this conflict could have stretched on for 2 years. The vast expanse of the territory and the multitude of slaves serve as both a potent symbol of the Empire's strength and the seeds of an insidious crisis. The Empire's enormity results in a sluggish response from its troops and complicates the assembly of forces, while the numerous slaves could very well become the architects of its downfall. Should circumstances shift, the invincible myth of the Milda army would be shattered, and the galaxy would erupt into flames of slave insurrections. Imagine if we possessed a fleet capable of striking directly at the heart of Milda's domain. The Milda fleet stationed in the outer regions would take half a year to return, while the reinforcements from the eastern and western provinces would require over a month to assemble. By the time they hastily arrive on the battlefield, they would only meet the brunt of our assault at the wormhole exit. Thus, while the Milda Empire appears formidable, it is, in reality, a frail serpent. Once we seize it by its vulnerable neck, it will be unable to defend itself. Mo Yuan's heart surged with emotion as he discerned the weaknesses of an overwhelmingly powerful adversary, illuminating hope amidst despair. Duan, remarkable indeed. For the first time inspired confidence in the future of Earth. Xiqing suddenly inquired, why do the Millardans not employ robots or artificially synthesize life on a large scale? Duan applauded, exclaiming, Qingqing has finally begun to contemplate issues. However, he continued, have you considered what type of planets have extensively utilized robots and artificial life throughout our year of exploration across dozens of worlds? In the 8th chapter, A Discourse on the World, Part 2, Xiqing furrowed her brow, reminiscing about their experiences over the past year. Ultimately surrendering to her limitations, I can only recall that regardless of who piloted the aircraft, they all met with explosive destruction at my hands. Beyond that, I have no further impressions. Duan sighed, remarking, perhaps it is precisely due to your focus that you have become the youngest ace pilot in Millardan history within such a brief span. He added, from now on, concentrate on combat. We shall handle the other matters. He took a deep sip of tea, casting a glance at Mo Yuan, his eyes shimmering with intensity. With an unprecedented seriousness, he posed the question, brother, who do you believe is responsible for safeguarding a nation? Mo Yuan pondered for a moment, cautiously responding, is it not the army? Duan pressed further, and who constitutes the army? Xiqing interjected, is that even a question? They are certainly recruited from the populace. Duan clapped his hands, affirming, precisely. Ultimately, soldiers are drawn from the people. Have you ever pondered why people strive to defend their homeland? Just like you. What compels you to fight? Even in the face of such despair, confronting an empire that spans the galaxy, why do we not relinquish our efforts? Why do we seek every opportunity to oppose this colossal entity? If we were to solely embrace the life of a Murda, indifferent to the fate of Earth, it would not be difficult for us to attain power within Murda with our abilities. Yet, why do we choose otherwise? At this moment, Heseeching interjected before Mo Yuan. Responding without hesitation, I am an Earthling, and of course, I must fight for Earth. Mo Yuan continued, I believe that even if I were to assimilate into Murda society, what about my family and friends? I cannot bear to see them go hungry. Duan Ming added, you all hold dear what you love. Whether this love is abstract or tangible, we invariably possess a special attachment to the place where we have grown, even though Earth may lag far behind Murda. And despite the many unsightly phenomena that persist there, it remains our home, filled with our memories, our childhood, and the joy nestled deep within our hearts. When our home is threatened, when someone arrogantly instructs us to obliterate the very source of our happiness, no matter how alluring the prospects they present may be, we will fight for that which we cherish. Those who possess faith will not surrender. Armies imbued with conviction shall never know defeat, and a nation with unwavering belief, regardless of the obstacles it encounters, will only continue to strive forward. When the citizens of a nation possess a profound sense of identity with their homeland, when they embrace the nation's endeavors and align with its ideology, they will unhesitatingly rise to fight when called upon, regardless of how absurd their sacrifices may appear to outsiders, or how trivial their contributions may seem. It is the unwavering commitment of countless individuals, filled with confidence and recognition of their country, that fortifies a nation as strength. Conversely, a nation rife with grievances about reality, discontent with society, and skepticism towards everything, where individuals criticize their homeland without ever offering their dedication, is a nation that deserves to be trampled by stronger peoples, destined to be swept into the annals of history as neglect. When war descends upon such a nation, its army will be vanquished as swiftly as frost under the sun. Its populace will be relegated to a state of servitude, compelled by the whip of their masters to learn the meanings of obedience and reverence. The chronicles of humanity have long attested to this truth. Countless brilliant civilizations have succumbed to armies fortified by faith due to the absence of belief among their people. One may deride the folly of those ordinary soldiers, mock them as mere pawns in the ambitions of their leaders. Yet let us not forget that our ancestors were ruthlessly slaughtered by those who, perhaps barbaric or ignorant, were undeniably driven by conviction. Duan Ming paused momentarily before continuing. No one is inherently inclined to engage in battle. All humans harbor a fear of death. What instills us with courage on the battlefield? What compels us to confront bloodshed without retreat? It is the knowledge that the principles we hold dear, the convictions in our hearts, will never permit us to falter. In comparison to death, what we truly dread losing are the cherished ideals we strive to protect. We cannot abide our beliefs being sullied, regardless of the object of our loyalty, be it our nation, loved ones, or even the ethereal deities, so long as we are imbued with the valor to fight for them, even amidst the most harrowing battlegrounds. A courageous soldier shall never relinquish their weapon. You may have forgotten, Ching, that we have previously encountered robotic legions and synthetic beings in the realms of those nations on the brink of annihilation. Their final desperate gambit yielded soldiers who could not alter their fate. These hastily created beings harbor no allegiance to their creators and are filled with disdain for serving a group to whom they feel no kinship. On the battlefield, it is often before we even launch our assault that these rebellious soldiers engage in fierce conflict with their masters. A nation can only be defended by its true citizens. Mo Yuan felt a surge of emotion. However, Heseeching remarked, yet the people on Earth remain embroiled in strife over a mere loaf of bread or a chance to mine in Africa. Duan Ming chuckled. Has Earth ever been devoid of such sordid affairs? Wasn't it once teeming with individuals who merely lamented society, their country, and others? Aren't there countless souls who, in their quest to be seen as good dogs, would bare their fangs at their own kin? From this perspective, perhaps the invasion by the Milda is not a misfortune after all, for the Milda do not seek those who merely engage in idle chatter. The harshness of reality compels us to fight for our very survival. It instilled in humanity the courage to struggle, reminding us that the advancements of others will not be freely bestowed upon us. For survival, the inhabitants of Earth must relinquish discontent and grievances, abandon sarcasm and ridicule, and devote their utmost energy to the fight. Today, some still contemplate the sale of dignity in exchange for the right to exist. However, when we assemble our fleet and convey to them that only by grasping their weapons can they truly attain freedom, we shall undoubtedly enlist the finest soldiers. As for the dregs, they shall naturally be vanquished by the valiant. Perhaps in the future, our descendants will express gratitude for our endeavors today, as civilization on Earth accelerates its development in the face of adversity. Nevertheless, Heseeching remarked, how can we possibly form a fleet? The Mildarents would never permit it. Duan Ming replied, fear not, the Mildarents will actively request us to establish a fleet. How could that be? Mo Yuanchi questioned. I have stated that the expansion of the Mildarent influence is too rapid for their mobile forces to keep pace. Consider this, when the Mildarent army suffers significant losses, they will lose their ability to defend all their colonies. Where then will they seek new recruits? Will they create a batch of artificial beings filled with resentment towards society, ready to turn against them at any moment? Or will they arm a contingent of obedient, docile slaves? Mo Yuan pondered, are you suggesting we should become the most compliant slaves? Indeed, at this juncture, our objective is to ensure that the Milradians perceive us as obedient and valuable allies, so that when the Milradian forces seek to expand, we shall be their foremost consideration. The Milradians will assist Earth in establishing a cosmic fleet. Yet, by the time they realize that their seemingly loyal hounds have turned against them, it will be far too late. Fortune has not been unkind to us. Earth and the Milradian homeworld, Milvi, are situated near the Orion Arm, rendering our proximity quite advantageous and granting us the prime opportunity to strike at their backs. Chapter 9. Heseeching's memories: the razor-edged red dragon, the tempestuous white dragon, and the star-like black dragon. These three individuals, who would ultimately determine the fate of Earth, set the tone for their initial encounter. United, they would strive to earn the trust of the Milradians, becoming their most devoted hounds, liberating Earth from its shackles, and creating conditions for the Milradians to arm our planet. However, the three of us alone are insufficient. The voice of Duan Ming echoed in Mo Yuan's mind. This was a compact psionic communicator implanted within the ear, enabling clandestine conversations utilizing psionic energy over a distance of 10,000 light-years. Given the opportunity to train, I am confident that I could mold Earthlings into competent warriors, and through the crucible of battle, they would emerge as seasoned veterans. Yet, the most pressing issue at hand is the inexplicable fact that the physical constitution of Earthlings is ill-suited for prolonged cosmic voyages. The Milradians possess a biological catalyst capable of unlocking human potential, yet Earthlings generally exhibit a rejection response to it. At present, only the three of us are eligible to join the military, and merely a few hundred individuals may become interstellar miners or other forms of laborers. If the majority of Earth's inhabitants cannot adapt to the interstellar environment, then our aspirations are nothing but a mirage. Therefore, we must devise a means to acquire intelligence regarding Milda biotech, enabling Earth scientists to research and develop potential catalysts suitable for humanity. As Mo Yuan absorbed Duan Ming's analysis, he also experienced Heseeching's flight skills. Their conversation unfolded aboard the flagship, the counterattack, while Mo Yuan's surviving slave soldiers had already been returned to the battleship Conqueror. As a slave soldier, Mo Yuan was not permitted to traverse between warships freely, thus Heseeching was tasked with escorting him back. Although the future missions are daunting and the path ahead is fraught with challenges, Mo Yuan harbors no fear. His greatest dread lies in the absence of direction and hope. Now, he has found individuals in whom he can entrust his ideals, and as long as they proceed along the path he has charted, the future of Earth holds promise. May I call you Ching? Despite being a 23-year-old young man, Mo Yuan remains inexperienced in matters of relationships. During his time on Earth, he lived in a small town with only a handful of families, and his limited childhood companions were those he had known since infancy. Faced with a stranger of the opposite sex, he couldn't help but feel a touch of shyness. Furthermore, the name Ching seemed rather intimate, while addressing her by her full name felt somewhat distant. Suit yourself, came the indifferent reply, although separated by 2 layers of visors, obscuring her expression. Mo Yuan imagined her face to be one of cold detachment. Your flying skills are quite impressive. Do you have any secrets? Mo Yuan sincerely inquired, deeply influenced by the aerial combat that transpired on Timmy 4, which sparked his keen interest in this young ace pilot. Of course. He was even more intrigued by Duan Ming, who appeared to be of a similar age yet possessed such remarkable prowess. Heseeching paused for a moment before coldly responding. Your skills are commendable as well. Perhaps we could engage in a friendly competition in the future. Mo Yuan chuckled wryly. No thanks. I lost consciousness right after executing that ultra maneuver. I have no desire for a repeat. Is that so? Your psychic abilities should be able to withstand that level of intensity. Perhaps you simply have not consumed enough blood. The red dragon jade is cursed. Without the stimulus of blood, it cannot unleash its power. At the mention of this, Mo Yuan's spirits lifted. The red dragon jade is cursed? What is the story behind that? Also, I recall Duan Ming mentioning 5 ancient jades. What of the other 2 psychics? Have they, like my father, chosen to live in seclusion? He Xiqing replied, I am unfamiliar with the details of the curse. However, your father willingly exchanged ancient jades with Duan Ming's father long ago, meaning that Duan Ming has owed you a life since birth. The vampire fate you bear was originally meant for him. Is that so? My father truly was too kind-hearted, Mo Yuan muttered under his breath. No wonder he treated me so well, even allowing me to draw his blood. He Xiqing scoffed, do you truly believe he is a benevolent soul? This individual harbors no notions of gratitude or resentment. He often articulates to me that the most terrifying aspect of life is allowing emotions to cloud one's judgment. One must act rightly, rather than simply following the dictates of sentiment. Mo Yuan inquired, then why does he behave in such a manner? He Xiqing replied, his thoughts are beyond the comprehension of others. He has always been this way. From childhood? Have you known each other for a long time? Indeed, we grew up together. He Xiqing said, her tone languid, as if the river of time had flowed backward, transporting her back to the distant days of her youth. He began his work at the intelligence agency at the tender age of 7, demonstrating extraordinary capabilities from an early age. He flawlessly executed every mission, vanquishing each adversary he faced. He had no friends, for none were deemed worthy of that title. One could never anticipate his thoughts. Every step he took was meticulously calculated, and everything he did held profound significance. He never engaged in trivial pursuits. During his leisure time, he immersed himself in research, contemplating political and military issues. I believe Uncle Duan must have prepared him for his current responsibilities from a young age. His mission is formidable, and the effort he expends is equally immense. Mo Yuan listened in astonishment, self-deprecatingly remarking, at 7, I could only play in the mud. The disparity is indeed vast. And what about you? What were you like as a child? Me? He Xiqing responded once again with a frosty tone. I killed my first man at the age of 9. Took to the skies for the first time at 11, piloting a J-17 fighter jet. By 13, I had achieved my first confirmed kill, totaling 13 enemy aircraft and 20 other planes downed over 5 years, alongside the destruction of 50 ground targets. At 19, I began my tenure at the Lunar Space Base, participating in flight tests for the first generation of Z country's cosmic bombers, until the invasion by Milda forced me into their military as a slave. Due to my performance in combat, I was promoted to pilot, and I have since downed 27 aircraft and successfully bombed 2 warships. Mo Yuan felt a deep sense of humiliation in the presence of such extraordinary beings, uncertain whether to consider himself fortunate or lamentable. It's time, prepare to disembark. The aircraft glided slowly past the massive hull, with flickering lights guiding them to the docking interface. As the cockpit opened, Mo Yuan and He Xiqing removed their flight suits. After presenting the pass issued by Duan Ming to the awaiting guard, Mo Yuan followed the soldiers' directions towards the new camp for the enslaved soldiers. While He Xiqing boarded the aircraft again, preparing to depart, in Mo Yuan's communicator, He Xiqing's voice echoed one last time. Remember, don't die too soon. Duan Ming owes you a life, and my father owes countless lives to your father. Do not deny me the chance for repayment. Chapter 10. Gomez's loyal hound General Gomez sat in his expansive swivel chair, gazing intently at the young man standing before him. His posture was impeccable, and his demeanor exuded an air of calm, embodying the very essence of a distinguished soldier at all times. I have reviewed your report. Although it deviates somewhat from our expectations, overall, you have performed commendably. By the way, did you not mention that you dispatched the finest pilots of the entire fleet to execute the mission? Why was the transport aircraft carrying the insurgent leader unable to make a successful emergency landing? Capturing the insurgent leader alive and compelling him to testify against Bornek would certainly have posed significant challenges for the Seed family. Duan Ming replied, My lord, it is impossible for any plan to anticipate all variables in advance. The world is perpetually rife with unforeseen circumstances. The insurgent leader from the Su clan possesses an astonishing level of psychic ability, and his piloting skills were something I had not accounted for. Gomez remarked, I do not intend to place blame. I am merely curious. Our intelligence officer has successfully won his favor, and according to her report, the insurgent leader appears to be an ordinary man devoid of combat capabilities. How then does he possess such formidable psychic powers? Duan Ming responded, I suspect he is adept at concealing his true abilities. Engaging with a leader from one of the 3 prominent noble families of the empire indicates that he must possess some considerable means. Gomez nodded slightly. Let us not dwell on the deceased. The current situation is nonetheless favorable. The patriarch of the Esteemed family has been discovered in an unexpected location, having perished alongside the leader of the insurrectionists. This should cause considerable embarrassment for those self-important individuals in the council for some time. By the way, how did you manage to seize the counterstrike? Duan Ming replied, upon receiving the news of the interception's failure, I immediately organized a strike team comprising 200 personnel. Disguised as a supply vessel, we successfully navigated through 3 layers of security systems with your pass after docking with the counterattack. We then launched a surprise assault on the central control room of the warship, where, through the surveillance equipment, I discovered the whereabouts of the Duke. However, by the time I arrived, he had already met his demise. Gomez exclaimed, You managed with only 200 men? Yet my masked troops did not receive any orders. What force did you employ? Duan Ming replied, Merely a group of slave soldiers. Impossible, Gomez asserted decisively. Even if you navigated the security systems with my pass. The guards in the central control room number a full regiment. How could 200 slave soldiers possibly pose a threat? Duan Ming calmly responded, My lord. What if these slave soldiers possess the combat prowess of the masked troops? You mean to say that you trained them? Gomez suddenly burst into laughter. Duan Ming, you have a knack for training soldiers as well. Just how many talents do you possess? If it weren't for that item you have in my possession, I would truly worry about whether I could rely on you. Who could truly harness someone as exceptional as you? Duan Ming spoke solemnly, My lord, throughout my life, I shall remain your most loyal dog. Gomez chuckled, Indeed, I understand. I possess that, after all. Haha, do you know? Perhaps there truly are divine beings in this world. Otherwise, how could I have encountered someone of your caliber during my most challenging times, particularly with that item you carry? He meaningfully remarked, I truly fail to comprehend why you would act in such a manner. Is there an inherent perversion lurking within the minds of all geniuses? Duan Ming replied with an air of calm, Perhaps, this is merely the nature of fate. Gomez interjected, Fate? Perhaps. By the way, how much longer do we estimate it will take to eradicate the remnants of the Sioux clan? Approximately another month, came the response. I see. So our operations against the Cortez Alliance will be postponed? Gomez cursed vehemently. Those damn Sioux people. The Cortez Alliance was his true source of turmoil. It was precisely due to the support of the Cortez Alliance that he had managed to ascend to the prominent position of governor of the Western Province, despite being a member of a family that was largely disregarded. Since the outbreak of rebellion in the Hydra Star domain 3 years ago, the scale of the insurrection had continually expanded, while the Empire's attempts to quell it had repeatedly faltered. With the 12th star domain having betrayed the sacred rule of Milda, the rebels formed an outright coalition. A year prior, the former governor of the Western Province personally led 5 fleets to suppress the insurgents, only to return in utter defeat, even losing his own life in the process. Following this debacle, the rebels gained significant momentum, igniting insurrections on numerous planets that had previously submitted to the Empire, with the Sioux clan being one such example. Other planets were also on the brink of rebellion. In a bid to stabilize the situation, the Western Province intensified its conscription of slave soldiers, yet the supply of troops remained critically strained. Upon receiving news of the catastrophic defeat, the parliament descended into chaos, leading to the Urian family losing the position of speaker. Yet, no one was willing to take on the arduous task of restoring order in the Western Province. Ultimately, it fell upon Gomez to bear this heavy burden. Opportunities are invariably concealed within challenges, a truth he comprehended profoundly. However, he had not anticipated the dire circumstances. The very mention of the Cortez Alliance was daunting, and even a mere faction of the Sioux proved to be a formidable challenge. Fortunately, Providence bestowed upon him a prodigious youth, alongside the means to bring about his own downfall. Reflecting on this, he addressed Duan Ming, Your strategic plan is commendable. It effectively quells the Sioux rebellion and leads to the disarray of the royal-controlled 10th Legion. Yet, I find myself bereft of a regular legion and 3 slave legions, which tightens our manpower significantly. Will this jeopardize our forthcoming campaign against the Cortez Alliance? Duan Ming replied, My lord, I have contemplated this matter. I firmly believe our resources are adequate. The previous deficiency in forces stemmed solely from the ineffectiveness of the slave troops. By enhancing their combat proficiency, our current strength will suffice to address the prevailing situation. Gomez pondered, yet, entrusting the slave soldiers poses a risk. Can they be relied upon? Duan Ming merely smiled in silence. Gomez waved his hand dismissively. Proceed to prepare the next phase of our operational plans. I shall deliberate on this further. Duan Ming bowed respectfully and exited Gomez's office. As he made his way back to the headquarters, Gomez's words stirred a tumult of memories within him, leaving him in a state of disquiet. To safeguard Mo Yuan's secret, he had been compelled to eliminate the Sioux governor. Nonetheless, this act proved worthwhile. Upon encountering Mo Yuan, he was resolute that this individual was far from ordinary, not only due to his identity as the possessor of the Black Dragon Jade, nor solely because of his remarkable evasion of Yi during aerial combat, but rather from an instinctive sense of peril that emanated from the depths of his soul upon merely laying eyes on him. Such an aura was unfamiliar to him. It was said that Mo Yuan's father was the most formidable psychic of his era on Earth. Could this be a hereditary trait? However, he held the Black Dragon Jade, while Mo Yuan possessed the accursed Red Dragon Jade. Father, mother, at this thought, Duan Ming felt a sharp pang in his heart. He had sacrificed far too much to achieve his goals, losing so much that it became unbearable. I am a human too. I too can feel pain. Why must I endure such suffering? He silently cried out in his heart. No, you are not human. You are merely a sacrifice, a vessel for the liberation of humanity. His father's words echoed in his ears. For the future of Earth, for our descendants to no longer be enslaved, you must shoulder this burden. Just as I would accept my fate with composure. Do you truly wish to proceed with this? Indeed. This is the only way to swiftly gain the trust of the murder people. No, I cannot. In his memories, he recoiled in terror. It appeared that he still possessed human emotions. I command you, you must comply. Following this, there ensued a darkness, a realm he wished to forget for all eternity. Duan Ming gently shook his head, inhaling deeply to temporarily dispel these vexatious thoughts, and began to reconsider his future actions. At this point, Mo Yuan must have garnered the respect of those slave soldiers due to his valiant demeanor in their presence. His identity as a vampire should no longer cast a shadow over him. Furthermore, my act of providing him with blood has, at the outset, fostered a bond of trust between us. Thus, in order to enhance his combat prowess in the shortest possible time, where might I seek a source of blood for him? Perhaps, the new recruit training program ought to be implemented within his battalion first?